Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Deku was the Grim Reaper. All credits for this video go to their respective authors. So please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The UA entrance exam approached faster than Midoriya expected, but he didn't feel underprepared. He managed to balance training at Dagaba and his education well enough in his opinion. Gami did not agree though. His successor was falling asleep way too many times in class for him to call this a win. His mother didn't seem to notice his frequent late nights out of the house. There were times where the teen was so afraid she'd catch him sneaking in after a long day of training. But she was often too drunk to notice. Of course, he wasn't lucky all the time, but he was getting fast enough to make it to his room before she did any serious harm. Unfortunately, the combination of training at Dagaba late into the day, sorting souls into the night, and getting up early to sort as well, it made it difficult to get more than 5 hours of sleep. He didn't want to admit he was having a hard time focusing his thoughts or that he was falling asleep in class. But it was obvious to Gami that the boy was struggling with it all, so the ghost did his best to lift his spirits wherever he could. Midoriya's birthday had passed during the 10 months before the exam. He really didn't find any joy celebrating his birthday though, since his father was obviously not around and his mother didn't care. So the man had taken it upon himself to make this year's birthday special. For his successor's previous birthdays, the man had usually gotten him notebooks or pencils. Sometimes when stores got overstocked with products, they would leave the extras outside in their alleyways, either to get rid of it or to try and store it sneakily. He would leave the teen sleeping at night to search the alleyways behind these stores, in hopes that he could find something suitable as a gift. It was pretty much all he could do, since he didn't have any money. It wasn't like he could really hold the cash anyway. And when the spirit did eventually find something he thought the boy would like, he would have to get him to go to the alleyway himself. He couldn't actually grab whatever he wanted to give. As much as he tried, his hands just passed right through the item. And though Midoriya constantly reminded him that his efforts were greatly appreciated, Gami never felt like he was doing enough. He cared so much for the teen, and it wasn't just because he was his successor. The Spectre could go on his own rant about how special he thought the boy was, from his endless perseverance, to his selfless personality, to his undeniable skills. Gami would dare say he viewed him as something akin to a son. So that was why he decided to make sure he did something different for his birthday this year. Midoriya had woken up the morning of his birthday as he did every other day. It was a Sunday, so the house was empty. He hadn't differed from his normal schedule, and worked until the sun broke dawn. He noticed that his mentor had been strangely quiet, but didn't comment on it. But as he finally left his room and entered the kitchen, the spirit finally spoke up. "Happy birthday, Izu." "Oh, thank you, Gami." He really wasn't expecting that to be the first word out of the Spectre's mouth. I have something for you," he told the teen, a slight waver in his voice. "It's in the living room." "No alleyways this time," he joked sarcastically. "Not this time," he snarked back, which Midoriya noted was unlike him. But he was curious about what the ghost had in store for him, so he left his cereal on the counter and made his way to the couch. As he entered the living room, Gami flew out from behind him and moved to stand behind the coffee table instead. The boy giggled at his unusual antics, but continued into the room. He couldn't pick out anything out of the ordinary. There wasn't anything like balloons or cake. Not that he expected that. But he didn't see any notebooks or pencils like he usually got from the spirit. He looked up in confusion, but the ghost just gestured for him to come inside further. That didn't help Midoriya's puzzlement, but he just decided to trust the man. He still didn't see anything, but as he finally walked past the couch, something did lay on the coffee table. "Gami," he started, picking up one of the items. "What is this?" "Unfold it. You will see." And so he did. The item felt soft and fabric-like in his hands. As he shook it open, he saw the sleeves fall out and realized what it was. A black tracksuit jacket unraveled right in front of him. "Well, this is really neat," he gasped out. "Well, there is more." The boy set down the jacket onto the couch and reached for the other folded object on the table. It was also black, but seemed larger than the jacket. He opened it up and the Spectre saw his eyes light up. "Are these matching sweatpants?" he cried in surprise. "Indeed they are," he said with pride. He flipped them around to look at the pants from all angles. The set altogether was pretty cohesive. The jacket had a white stripe running down each sleeve, which connected to the stripe that ran down each leg of the sweatpants. Everything else was a solid, shiny black that felt smooth in his fingers. As he was laying the pants next to the jacket, he noticed that said jacket had a turtleneck. That made him really happy, as the burn scar from his father stretched up to the base of his neck, and often made him self-conscious. "I noticed that old green tracksuit in your closet. That was what you were planning to wear to the entrance exam, correct?" He didn't wait for a response. "I figured you would rather wear something newer and closer to your current size. I also did not think you would want to wear something so attention-grabbing. Midoriya looked up to flash a wide, bright smile at the man. You know me so well. Actually, there is one last thing. Though, check in the right pocket of the jacket. The boy moved back to the couch to examine the tracksuit top again. He reached into the right pocket hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. Immediately, his hand met something smooth and fabric-like. It was similar to the feel of the tracksuit. But he noted that whatever this was, it felt thicker and stiffer. Unable to resist his curiosity any longer, he pulled out the item. Now, in his hand, were a pair of black, leather gloves. But it wasn't like the polyester ones he usually wore. These gloves were fingerless. I know you have not ever been really comfortable with fingerless gloves, but I believe they would be useful to you for the exam. I'm not really sure. You do not have to wear them the entire time. Just when the practical exam will start, it will be easier for you to use DT without having to rip your other gloves. The teen shuffled the new gloves between his own gloved hand, internally debating Gami's preposition. He didn't see the man also shuffle nervously. You do have a point. He slowly took off his signature polyester gloves to slip on his new ones. He was careful not to accidentally disintegrate them as he put them on. He flexed his fingers and turned his hands to inspect them. His silence put the spirit on edge. Maybe the gloves were a bad idea. He really didn't mean to push his successor out of his comfort zone, especially on his birthday of all days. Then, he realized he was being hugged, which completely destroyed any sense of regret he had. He embraced back tightly, knowing Midoriya didn't give hugs often. Thanks, Gami, he sniffled. I really don't deserve this. No, do not say that. The man replied softly. You deserve so much more. I wish I could give you more. And at that, the boy bursted into tears, loudly sobbing into the spirit's robe. His bare fingers gripped the man's clothing tightly. The ghost panicked, afraid he did something wrong. Even now, after knowing the teen for around 11 years, he still didn't think he was good with kids. Said teen noticed the specter's uncertainty and tried to clear up the mess. I'm sorry, he said, but it was pretty muffled by his face in the robe. I'm just so happy. He pulled his face out and removed his hands to wipe at his eyes. He glanced up, cheeks red, but smiled the largest smile he could muster. He shook his hands next to his face, showing off his grin and new gloves. Gami seemed to get the message that Midoriya wasn't upset at him. He smiled, though no one could tell, and ruffled the boy's hair. This was really great, he sighed. Thank you. It was the least I could do. The two of them simply stood there, content with everything in the moment. That was, until the logical side of the teen's brain finally kicked in. Wait, how did you even get this here? I brought it here, the man stated nonchalantly. Well, obviously. But how did you touch it? Gami was being uncharacteristically sarcastic today. I am not too sure, he shrugged. But it all worked out, did it not? He huffed. I guess so. He walked back over to the couch to grab his tracksuit. When he did a double take. Wait, where did you even get this? Not in an alleyway, I can assure you. You didn't steal this, did you? He joked. But when the specter didn't respond, Midoriya grew worried. Gami, he said sternly. That is a secret. GAMI. The teen whined loudly, a bit unsure of whether his friend was joking back. The two then erupted into laughter and sat together on the couch. The boy would later give away his old and battered green tracksuit to a clothing drive in a nearby neighborhood. He would then have to find the space to hang his new one up, as the older one was folded and tucked away in the corner of a shelf. Then he would panic a bit on whether he should wear the set a few times to break it in or leave it pristine for the big day. But that would all happen later. Right now, all Midoriya was worried about was enjoying the high of his birthday. Maybe he would indulge himself today. He had the money to order himself some catsuit, and if he didn't feel like cooking on his special day, maybe he wouldn't train today, and instead analyze some quirks mentioned on the news. He could just go out and try to catch a fight if he really wanted to see a quirk in action. It didn't really matter to him what he did today, just as long as he did it with Gami. Finally, the big day came. Midoriya was up way before the sun had risen. He was trying to get in some last-minute training at Dagaba, though it was nothing as strenuous as what he had been doing in the months before. The beach had been completely engulfed in trash when he and Gami saw it the first day, but now only a few bits remained hidden in the sand. The spirit was left shocked at the sight of the beach restored to how it looked before. The boy would bet that the ghost was about to cry based off the small wavers in his voice, and that would certainly be an oddity. Currently, the two were walking the beach, with the teen kicking around the sand in hopes to find any underlying trash. Any he did find, he would decay with his hand. It would be pointless to use his scythe when the pieces were only the size of his foot and smaller. There actually wasn't much to clean up, so the duo eventually made their way to sitting by the shore, just far enough so that the ocean would only touch their feet. This was the first time Midoriya had gotten the chance to sit by the coastline. But he could tell why the specter liked it so much. He felt calm and serene, and the numerous problems plaguing him each day withered away at the sight of the sparkling sea. If the exam wasn't this day, he wouldn't mind spending his entire day here. Oh well, the teen started, standing up from the sand. We'd better get going. Indeed. Are we stopping at the house? He looked down at himself. Sure, he did have his backpack with his school uniform and his new tracksuit in case he ended up running late. But he still had 3 hours, and if he didn't have to, there was no way he was going to slip his uniform over his sweaty and sandy self. Yup, I definitely need to shower. And so the two left the comfort of the beautiful and now clean beach park towards their home. The 20-minute walk didn't take long, and the sidewalks were still fairly empty since it was so early. He ran home the entire way, eager to get that last bit of training in. Skidding to a stop at his door, he fumbled with his keys before entering. There wasn't anyone inside, but it wasn't like he was expecting anyone. He walked quietly in, completely opposite of how he was moving before. He placed his bag on the couch, careful not to throw it in fear of wrinkling his uniform. Gami didn't fear wrinkles though, and threw himself down onto the sofa. Hey, careful with my bag, Midoriya chuckled. I will. He made his way towards the bathroom, eager to wash off all the sand and grime. I'll be in the shower. Knock if you need anything, the boy teased. He turned around and walked into the bathroom, not getting to see the spirit narrow his eyes at him. Not that he would be able to see it, even if he was looking. Gami listened as the shower turned on. He could hear the water trickling down the tiled wall and then down the drain. It was peaceful to observe. And the ghost didn't mind that his successor forgot to turn on the TV for him. The teen already had so much responsibility. He didn't want to add to that. Sometimes, the specter wished he could do more, but his transparent form limited him on practically everything. He could only interact with Midoriya himself and the couch, to which the boy reassured him was an impressive feat. But he never felt like it was. He could never help with money, nor could he help in fights. He couldn't even carry his bag for goodness sake. It was demotivating to watch the teen struggle and not be able to do anything. But today was one of the most important days of his successor's life. He wasn't going to sit around and brood. The ghost wasn't sure how, but he would do his best to aid him any way he could today. At the very least, he wouldn't let the boy pick up on his sour mood. That would surely spoil his own, and Gami did not want that to happen right before the exam. Suddenly, a voice called through the bathroom door, startling the spirit out of his thoughts. Hey Gami, the voice was pretty muffled, but that was to be expected since it was coming through the door. Can you touch my bag? Said Ghost's brows furrowed in confusion, but he swung a free hand at the backpack. Like he expected, his hand passed right through. No, I cannot. He heard the voice groan. Ugh, I figured. Then, the bathroom door creaked open, and out came Midoriya with only a towel wrapped around his waist. His signature green hair was dripping wet. But what was more noticeable was the large scar that spread from the base of his neck down to the middle of his chest, covering the top of his right shoulder as well. Medium-sized cuts ran down his arms, but the spirit knew they were from the bottle shards that occasionally got embedded in his skin. He knew the teen tried to hide his scars, so he averted his eyes quickly in hopes he wasn't making him uncomfortable. The boy was uncomfortable at showing so much of his injuries, but tried not to show it. I forgot my uniform in my bag. So you went into the bathroom with no clothes? He pouted. I had my boxers. The specter huffed jokingly. Whatever you say. He grumbled and snatched his backpack, then rushed off to his bedroom. Gami smirked, feeling like he had thoroughly gotten his revenge for the comment earlier. The man looked up at the clock. Midoriya's shower hadn't lasted as long as he thought it did. As long as the teen didn't take too long getting ready, they would be able to arrive at UA with ample time to spare. As if he had read the ghost's mind, the boy emerged from his room fully dressed in his school's uniform. He had his backpack strung over his shoulders and was currently putting on his usual polyester gloves. I've got my tracksuit and my other gloves, he cheered. Let's get going. All right then, he replied and lifted himself off the couch. The duo left the house eagerly, with Midoriya quickly locking the front door. He then shoved his house keys into his backpack and started towards the subway, Gami close behind. He gripped his bag's straps confidently. A small smile adorned his face. Today was his big day, and nothing was going to stop him. 1 40-minute subway ride later, the two had arrived at the front entrance of UA High School. The school was large and grand. The sunlight that bounced off its numerous windows could be mistaken for the building simply shining on its own. Bare trees lined the walkway, and Midoriya was excited to see how they would frame it once they grew leaves again. He was a bit nervous, but that was to be expected. He knew as long as he took steps forward, no matter how slow or timid they were, he would make it through that door. Besides, the boy knew he wasn't alone. With Gami simply walking beside him, he knew he could take on anything this exam threw at him. Get out of my way or you're dead. The teen instinctively flinched away from that voice. He didn't even need to look to confirm who it was. Bakugo walked past him, seemingly annoyed. He wore a moderate coat and a beige scarf over his uniform. Midoriya stared, a bit jealous towards the blonde. The set of winter accessories looked warm and cozy, and much more protective than simply the school uniform like the shy teen was wearing. He didn't respond to Bakugo though. This was the first time he'd spoken to him since the sludge villain incident. Actually, the angry teen hadn't tormented him since the villain attack either. Not that he or Gami hadn't noticed. Both were very observant and picked up on the strange behavior, but just took it as a blessing in disguise. The kids around them noticed the blonde as well and started whispering. Bakugo was infamous for that whole mess with the sludge villain. His face was known throughout practically the whole country, but the boy wasn't jealous over that. He was glad he wasn't the center of attention. That would make him simply more nervous. Well, Izu, the ghost began, do not let him bother you. Let's get inside. He hummed, careful not to seem as if he was talking to himself. But Gami still picked up on his successor's shaky confidence. So he kept his pep talk going, keep these past 10 months fresh in your mind. You are an entirely new person and this is your first step to becoming a hero. He nodded sharply, looking up at his mentor. This is your time to shine and move forward. Yeah, he whispered strongly, trying his best to keep his voice under his breath. The ghost was right. This was his first step as well as an important one, and he knew he had the skills to have a chance. Staring at the specter, he flashed a small, unassuming smile to show the man he was feeling good, and then proceeded to trip over his own feet in distraction. He could hear Gami yell his name in concern, but he was about to fall on his face. What a great way to start the day. But he never met the ground. Instead, he floated a few inches above it. He could definitely admit he was surprised, but he didn't squirm around or anything. He turned his head to see a pretty-looking brunette wearing a burgundy coat. Are you okay? She asked gently. Oh yeah, he stammered back. The girl smiled before helping him back upright. Once he was, Midoriya felt himself stop floating and land softly onto the walkway again. He was still in a state of semi-shock and didn't realize he had been touched on the arm, right under his scar. It's my quirk, she continued. Sorry for stopping you, but it's a bad omen to trip and fall. Oh well, thank you, the teen replied shakily. This sure is nerve-wracking, she chuckled, breathing out a puff of frozen air. Yeah, for sure. The brunette then started to walk away, but as she did, she looked back and waved. Good luck to the both of us. Midoriya went to reply back, but by the time he willed up the confidence, she was gone. He wasn't really sure what just happened. All he really figured out was that he just had a nice conversation with another kid his age. That was definitely a first. Izu, we should get going, his mentor finally said, snapping him out of his head. Oh yeah, right, he stuttered out. A lot of the other kids around him were now eyeing him in sneaking glances. They were probably sizing him up and deeming him not a threat. The boy's fingers shook as he scampered up the steps and into the school, his confidence faltering a bit. He hated being the center of attention. The teen walked into the large lecture hall, albeit a bit later than he wanted to. He shuffled to find his seat, which was unfortunately next to Bakugo. He sat nervously and waited for the briefing to start. Gami must have noticed his shuffling, because the man placed his hand on his left shoulder, avoiding the one with the scar. He brought his hand up to grip the spirit's extended sleeve, making it look like he was grabbing his uniform instead. Welcome to today's live performance. The shout nearly made Midoriya yelp in surprise. Everybody say hey. There was no way he was going to yell back, even if it was present Mike. He was eager to draw as little attention to his form as possible. He noticed that everyone else in the hall felt the same way, even if it wasn't for the same reasons. The pro faltered a bit under the heavy silence, but immediately followed that up with more excitement. Well, that's cool, my examinee listeners. The hero continued. I'm here to present the guidelines of your practical. Are you ready? Again, he was met with pure silence, so he answered his own call with a loud yeah. Izu, the ghost's low monotone voice startled the boy a bit. Who is this loud, obnoxious man? That's the voice hero, Present Mike, he explained softly. He's got an offensively powerful voice-activated quirk, plus his own radio show and everything. Shut up, nerd, Bakugo groaned. The teen wasn't expecting him to talk, but he did follow his directions. This is how the test will go, listeners. You'll be experiencing 10-minute-long mock sit-escape maneuvers. Present Mike resumed. Bring along whatever you want. After this presentation, you'll each head to your assigned testing location. At that, there were murmurs in the crowd. Midoriya and Gami both listened in. That's so kids from the same middle school can't help each other out. And why consecutive ID numbers are assigned to different locations. Midoriya checked out his exam card. After glancing at Bakugo's next to him, he confirmed the whispers. His ID number was only one lower than the blonde, but they weren't assigned the same exam location. That made him release a sigh of relief. He definitely wouldn't be comfortable while knowing the angry teen could come out from any corner and attack him. After letting the students in the hall talk for a bit, the hero got back on track. Each side is filled with 3 kinds of faux villains. Points are awarded for defeating each according to their own respective difficulty levels. So they would be fighting faux villains. That made the boy feel much better about his chances. The villains would likely be dummies or robots, and neither felt any pain. He would be able to use DT without too much guilt then. Use your quirks to disable these faux villains and earn points. That's your goal, listeners. You are looking very confident, Izu. The teen let out a happy huff, quietly confirming the man's statement. Of course, attacking other examinees is prohibited. That's not very hero-like. Suddenly, a student stood up from his seat. Both he and the ghost moved to look at him. The kid was tall, with very broad shoulders and a broad stance to match. He had neatly combed bluish-black hair and what looked to be a pair of square-framed glasses, but he couldn't really tell as he was facing away. "May I ask a question?" the student exclaimed loudly, raising his hand stiffly into the air. He continued without any confirmation from the hero. "There appear to be no fewer than 4 varieties of faux villains on this handout. Such a blatant error is highly unbecoming for UA. We are all here today in hopes of being molded into model heroes." Midoriya had noticed the same thing, but he assumed that present Mike would explain it later. I guess he would have to explain it now then. "And you, with the curly hair." The bold teen was now pointing at him. He jolted from the sudden call, and began to wither under the stares of everyone else in the hall. "You've been muttering this whole time. It's distracting. If this is some sort of game to you, then leave immediately." At that, the timid teen sank down into his chair. There were many giggles and glares, all of which were directed at him. Gami growled aggressively, fed up with rude children at this point. All right. The pro finally broke the tension. "Examinee 7111, nice catch. But the 4th faux villain gets you 0 points. He's more of an obstacle than anything." Present Mike waved his hands around, trying to emphasize his point. "There's only one at each site. A gimmick that will rampage around in close quarters." "Thank you, sir. I apologize for the interruption." The blunt kid bowed, then sat back down. "Well, that's all from me. I'll leave you listeners with our school motto." Midoriya gripped his exam card with hesitation. His confidence was sorely shaken from all that had happened. And the exam hadn't even started yet. Plus ultra. Break a leg, everyone. Whoa, Midoriya gasped out at the sight of the faux city. It was so amazing how UA had a bunch of these on campus. The teen looked around in awe. Even his fellow examinees amazed him. "Everyone here looks so confident," he whispered to the spirit standing next to him. "They've even got equipment to match their quirks." "That may be true," the man replied, "but do not forget about yourself. You are just as impressive." "I don't know." He tugged on his new tracksuit. He couldn't lie. He felt good in his black jacket and pants. He had switched out his usual polyester gloves for his new fingerless, leather ones. He was a bit nervous wearing them, but he knew they would be better for the exam than the ones he felt comfortable wearing. At first, he thought he looked too monochrome when he tried on the tracksuit, so he made sure to wear his signature red sneakers to fully complete the outfit. Looking around, he spotted the nice girl who had helped him before the briefing. She had her eyes closed and was moving her hands rhythmically. "Oh look, Gami," he mumbled. "It's her. She looks kinda nervous though." "Indeed. Maybe I should see if I can boost her spirits, since she helped me out earlier." "That sounds like a good idea, as well as a friendly gesture." Midoriya took some slow steps towards the brunette, but was completely halted in his tracks by a firm grab to his right shoulder. "What are you doing?" Hoping to interfere, the duo recognized it as the same student who had called out the boy before. Gami noticed his successor's breath turn raspy. The child was still tightly holding the shoulder with the scar. He could see the boy's hands shaking. Murmurs grew from the crowd as they once did in the lecture hall. Each one made the reserved teen doubt himself more. That kid was acting like an idiot at the front gate. He flinches at the slightest touch. I guess that's one less rival to worry about. Midoriya went to swat away the hand, but then he realized he didn't have his usual gloves on. As much as this kid made him uncomfortable, he wouldn't put him at risk if he couldn't control his power. So he mustered up all the leftover courage he had. "Get your hand off me," he spoke bitterly. Wait, bitterness. This wasn't him. Where was this coming from? "Before we have a problem." "What?" The kid scoffed, but removed his hand. "That isn't like a hero at all." But the teen didn't care. He was done being pushed around today. He felt an unnatural rage pooling in his gut, and he was a bit afraid of it. He wasn't a very angry person, and he really didn't want to become one. So he took a deep breath in and focused his thoughts anywhere else, as long as they weren't on the kids around him. "That was unlike you, Izu. Boy, do I know." Suddenly, Present Mike's voice echoed over the plaza. "And begin." To the boy, it felt like a switch flipped. He could hear the groans of the gates being opened, but didn't even hesitate. He ran through the crowd of examinees and was the first to enter the faux city. "The test has started." The hero yelled to the rest of the crowd. "That kid's got the right idea." All the other examinees then took off, pushing past each other to try and get a head start. But none could catch up to the boy they were just mocking. Gami, who stayed behind with the other kids, rushed to catch up with his successor. Midoriya was definitely not as confident as he was when he first walked into UA's front gate, but he would make do. Sprinting down a fake street, he could hear a sudden crack to the building next to him. Then, a huge robot bursted through the wall of one of the faux buildings. He could read a bold, white one on one of its appendages. "It's a one-pointer. They're quick, but fragile. He remembered from the handout back at the briefing, but he didn't flinch as most would expect him to. Instead, he flexed his hand and summoned his weapon. The robot charged him. Target locked. Prepare for termination. He gripped his scythe with both hands, lifting it up over his head. He poured his whole body as well as DT into the swing. The blade cut cleanly into the robot, but that wasn't what did the most damage to the villain. As he sliced, DT instantaneously spread throughout the entire bot and it crumbled into pieces, metal chunks shattering everywhere. "That's 1 point for me," he exclaimed proudly, making his weapon disappear. "Great job, Izu." The teen turned around in surprise. He hadn't noticed that Gami wasn't with him, but he didn't have any time to spare. Rushing out of the wrecked area, he went on search for more villains. "Down here, there are 2, the ghost called out. He responded immediately, racing down towards his mentor's voice. He turned down a seemingly empty alleyway, only to watch the specter point up. He looked up in confusion, only to jump back as a 1-pointer and a 2-pointer fell from above him. He didn't have time to summon his weapon, nor the room to swing it, but he still didn't hesitate. Almost acting on instinct, he swiped one of his hands out to graze the 1-pointer, but as it did, the robot cracked and fell to the ground in pieces. The 2-pointer's large scorpion tail lunged at his form, but he leaped out of the way, then countering with a strike using his other hand. The robot decayed just as the others had. 4 points. He cried to no one in particular. "Gami, can you keep searching for robots? I shall do my best." "Great. Then let's go." The two continued their team strategy, with the spirit acting as an intelligence gatherer and Midoriya swooping in to get a quick kill. They worked extremely well, as Gami's spiritual form allowed him to pass through rubble and buildings to find bots or map out paths. And while he would never admit it to his successor, his fears from earlier were quelled. The man was worried that he wouldn't be able to do much for the boy during his exam, but those thoughts diminished slowly after each robot he discovered. The teen largely favored his scythe when dismantling the foe villains, still unsure of his new gloves. But if a situation arose, similar to the alleyway before, he acted completely on instinct, unafraid to use his deadly touch. He was quick on his feet too, not pausing for a moment after he scored a point. Unfortunately, he had a few points stolen from him, but even then, he'd racked up a decent 26 points. 6 minutes, 2 seconds remaining. He could hear from a speaker somewhere. He now found himself in the center of the mock city, surrounded by robot carcasses. There were other examinees around him as well, but no active villains to fight. "I cannot find any more enemies." He could hear the other kids calling out their points, and as each score was set and higher than his own, his confidence faltered. This wasn't good. Unsure of what to do, he looked around at the kids in the area. If the situation were different, he'd love to examine their quirks. Then, he felt the entire ground shake violently. He, as well as the other examinees, searched around for what could be causing it. That's when all hell broke loose. Midoriya immediately recognized it as the 0-pointer present Mike mentioned back in the briefing. It tore through the tops of buildings with ease as it plowed its own route down the street. Debris fell everywhere as all the students rushed to escape its wrath. He could make out the kid that had embarrassed him earlier as one of the first to get away, with surprising speed. The teen figured he must have some sort of speed quirk. "Izu, let us get going." Gami called out over the chaos. "This looks dangerous." "I guess that's true. Hopefully we can find some more points before the exam ends." So he did his best not to get trampled by the crowd as he evacuated. Weaving around fallen, as well as falling debris was challenging, but similar to the sludge villain fight in the alleyway, so he didn't have as much trouble as he expected. He turned one last time, just to view the destruction of the massive obstacle. His eyes widened in shock, and not from said destruction. The nice brunette, who had made sure he didn't fall on his way into the lecture hall, who he had his first pleasant student conversation with, who had wished him luck on the exam, was lying helpless on the broken pavement. He turned around completely now, ignoring his mentor's comments on how he should keep moving. The 0-pointer was plowing towards her, with no intention of stopping. He froze, internally debating what he should do. He hadn't had a premonition about her, so surely she wasn't going to die, right? The UA staff would surely stop the robot before it reached her, right? But what if they didn't? Was this her time to go? That thought sickened him. It's a bad omen to trip and fall. That killed any conflict he had. He rushed towards her prone form. She struggled to look up at him. He noticed her left foot was caught under a pile of rubble from the villain's rampage. "Don't move," Midoriya reassured her. "I'll get you out." She didn't answer, but he could see it in her face. He wouldn't fail the first person his age that had been nice to him. He slammed both hands onto the pile of debris and instantly, all of the rubble decayed away, turning to mere dust. He didn't have the time to look at her reaction, but if he did, he would see complete shock and awe plastered on it. He took a glance at her recently trapped ankle and winced. "Can you walk?" He knew she couldn't, but figured he'd ask anyway. No. "All right then, I'm going to carry you." The teen moved quickly to her side and slid his arms under her limp body. With a huff, he mustered up more of his strength to lift her up. She wasn't particularly heavy, but he has also never carried a person before. He cradled her in his arms and took steady, but fast steps away from the zero-pointer. "You can set her down here." Gami pointed towards a building away from the giant robot. "This building is still structurally sound." Midoriya didn't respond, but rushed over to the building that the spirit picked out. He set her down against the wall of the building. She immediately cradled her injured foot, but looked up at him. Thank you," the brunette whimpered. He nodded, but lurched his attention back to the zero-pointer at a loud crash. He watched it ram into another building, bringing it down without a sweat. "This is bad," he said aloud. "Someone is going to get seriously hurt if that thing isn't stopped." 2 minutes remaining. He flinched at that. 2 minutes. That's it. That wouldn't be enough time to find any more robots. That wasn't enough time to get the points he needed to pass the exam. But it was enough time to stop the rampaging robot. He rushed away from the girl who he had just helped, ignoring the specter's cries for him not to. He couldn't just disintegrate the bot from one of its feet. With the way it hunched over, if he did, the bot would come crashing to the ground faster than he could decay it. That would only put more people in danger. He would have to start from the top. Reaching the zero-pointer massive, moving foot, he made a split-second decision that would nearly give Gami a heart attack, despite not having a physical heart. The boy hastily summoned his scythe and poured a small amount of DT into it. Then he slammed as high as he could into the robot's foot. Of course, the bot didn't even flinch, but that wasn't his plan. He tugged on his weapon, and once he was sure it wouldn't come out, he stopped the flow of DT, effectively ending the decay. Using only his upper body strength he had gained from swinging the thing around at Dagaba, he began pulling himself up the handle of his weapon. "What is he doing?" the girl cried from her spot by the building. The ghost standing next to her couldn't agree more. Once Midoriya reached the end of his scythe's handle, he removed one of his hands. He made a mental note to thank his mentor later for the fingerless gloves as he raised a hand above his head and grabbed as high as he could. Again, only using a small amount of DT. He decayed the space where his hand was, just enough to make an indentation that he could grip. He removed his other hand, the one still holding onto the handle, and did the same thing. In the moment, he relied solely on his upper body strength, as he didn't have a place for his feet to rest yet. He continued the rhythm, effectively scaling the zero-pointer like a rock climber. His feet eventually found placement in the holes he had first decayed for his hands, working fast and furiously. He climbed up the leg and back of the robot, with the injured brunette and his mentor watching on in astonishment. He reached the right shoulder of the bot and hoisted himself onto it, stabling his form on all fours. But even now, just disintegrating the zero-pointer's head wouldn't be enough to make it fall backwards as he needed it to. "I need to get in front of it." And so, with who knows how much time left to spare, he scampered down the robot's right arm, remaining on all fours so as to not fall off. The bot still didn't notice him, maybe considering him too small of a threat to really care about. But that worked in Midoriya's favor, as he had no trouble reaching the end of the metal arm. Looking up at the robot's rectangular face, he formulated a plan. The teen flexed his hand again, gripping the familiar feeling of his weapon's handle in both hands. He then made another decision that would make the ghost keel over, even though he again technically couldn't. He leaped off the arm of the zero-pointer, but turned his body so he was facing it head-on in the air, lifting his scythe as above his head as he possibly could. He channeled every single ounce of DT he had and more, and shared it with his weapon. "I need to hit this thing with everything I've got. Then, the backlash of my swing should make it fall backwards." With every bit of strength and DT he had, he slashed the blade directly at the robot's head. The swing ripped through the air with force Midoriya had never used before, but it wasn't close enough to hit the villain's head. No, he began to fall, thinking he had failed, that all his efforts were for nothing. But a loud explosion made him look up. His swing, while it only cut air, had so much DT pouring through it that it disintegrated every single molecule it had passed through. The absence of anything in that strike created an unstable vacuum, and as the molecules around it rushed to fill the void, the sheer instability generated an enormous shockwave that struck the zero-pointer head-on. The teen watched as the gigantic robot's face was decimated by the blow. It fell completely backwards from the swing and crashed into the area it had destroyed before, injuring no more examinees. He knew there was no way it would be able to get up after that. Everyone in the mock city turned to watch the zero-pointer collapse and gasped in pure shock. Some had gotten to watch the show in action, but many were left wondering who took down that massive of an obstacle. Unfortunately, there was one part of his master plan that went unaccounted for, that being his descent. He hadn't thought about how he would get down once he jumped off the robot. But as he was currently falling, the boy couldn't think of any way he could save himself. Sure, he wouldn't die of course, but his modified quirk records didn't mention his immortality at all. Once he eventually recovered from being a pile of mush, he would have to explain himself, and that would obviously cause a lot of problems. As he came closer and closer to the ground, he truly realized there was nothing he could do. If he even tried to do a similar strike at the ground, the shockwave would likely injure many examinees. He would just have to splatter and come up with a story later. Suddenly, he was slapped in the face. His end wasn't as painful as he expected, but he wasn't complaining. But then he noticed he was floating above the ground, just inches from falling face flat. He instantly knew what was going on. It was the girl's Quirk again. He looked up at her and watched as she floated on a chunk of a robot. She looked to be struggling and in pain. Midoriya felt the guilt pool in his stomach. He didn't mean for her to get hurt more, especially trying to save him. Release, she stammered out quietly, but just loud enough for him to hear. He then dropped to the ground roughly, and the robot that the brunette was on fell right beside him. He got to his feet as quickly as he could and rushed over to her. Watch out, she cried, waving one hand in front of her face. He stopped in his tracks at her warning and stepped back as she proceeded to barf right at the spot he previously was at. When she finished, he stumbled over to the side of the robot piece she was still laying on. Are you all right? He asked. Here, let me help you down. She gratefully took his outstretched hand and pulled herself up so that she was sitting. The teen then motioned for her to jump down, opening his arms to gesture that he would catch her. The girl hesitated, but slid herself off the rubble. And as he had gestured, he did catch her, making sure her injured foot didn't hit the ground. I'm going to set you down. Is that okay? She nodded. So Midoriya set her down against the robot piece she had been floating on, just like he had done originally with the building. And it's over. The boy finally let out the breath he had been holding since the beginning of the exam, and let his shoulders slump. He was sure he hadn't passed the exam, but he had taken down the 0-pointer single-handedly. That was enough for him to feel semi-prideful. The examinees had now congregated around him and the girl, whispers and murmurs traveling through the crowd. But Midoriya didn't care at that moment. He just wanted to make sure the brunette was okay before he left. The crowd then cleared as a small, old lady made her way through, using a giant syringe as a cane. He turned to look at the woman, immediately recognizing who it was. Recovery girl, the teen called out. Oh, the heroine responded. She has an injury to her left foot, he stated, motioning to the sitting girl. Well, all right then. The older woman moved to give the girl a kiss on her head, almost instantaneously. Her injured foot was completely healed, as if she never had the injury to begin with. Are you hurt anywhere, dearie? She now asked him. No. Nonsense. Here, take these gummies. She then shoved a handful of gummy bears into his hand. He stumbled to catch them, but a good majority of them decayed at his fingertips. She looked up at him in confusion. Sorry, he apologized. That happens when I'm stressed. Oh, that's all right. Do you want any more? No, this is fine. He shoved the remaining gummies into his mouth. She laughed at his antics. All right then, dearie. Have a nice day. Midoriya moved to walk out with the rest of the examinees, but not before turning back to smile at the brunette. She smiled back at him, but before she could call out for him to stop, he was gone. Midoriya was confident he didn't pass. He knew that he'd scored well enough on the written portion of the exam, but with only 26 points, there was no way he passed the practical portion. In the week after the exam, Gami did his best to lift the boy's mood. Sure, he did drill into him the day after the exam, making sure his successor would be more self-preserving in the future. But he was proud of him and of his success with his abilities. The shockwave from his scythe was proof enough that his training had paid off. But that week, there wasn't much the man could do to make him feel better about his performance. He was sorely convinced that he'd blown the only shot he had at UA. His mother obviously hadn't noticed her son's change in behavior, and neither had his classmates. Ishihara would have probably noticed, but he hadn't gone to see the man since the entrance exam. He didn't want to disappoint the only other person that had believed in him. It was around midday, and Midoriya was writing in one of his notebooks with the news playing in the background. The Spectre had gotten up at some point and hadn't joined him back on the couch. The man had probably left for the day, and he couldn't blame him. Who would want to hang out with such a failure like him? Izu. He turned to face the call in confusion. He thought that Gami had left. The letter. It's outside. At that, he stumbled off of the couch and raced out the front door. Just as the spirit said, the letter from UA was inside his mailbox. He grabbed the envelope and rushed back inside, with the ghost right behind him. They both plopped themselves onto the sofa, but staring at the letter in his hands, the teen suddenly lost all excitement to open it. He was lucky to have his normal polyester gloves on, or the envelope would have probably disintegrated out of stress. The man sitting next to him noticed his successor's hesitance and tried to ease him into opening the letter. Izu, we both know how great you are, and if UA cannot see that, then we will find another way for you to become a hero. The boy sighed. I guess you're right. He carefully ripped open the top and slid the contents out onto the coffee table. Out came a piece of paper and a metallic disc. As the disc hit the table, though, it seemed to turn on. Both Midoriya and Gami flinched away from the bright screen that seemed to emerge from the device. This is a projection. And that was the last voice he wanted to hear today. He could hear the ghost next to him groan. He almost did the same. Young Midoriya, I am here to discuss your exam results. I wonder why All Might is speaking on behalf of UA. Midoriya was wondering the exact same thing. You did pass the written exam with flying colors. He pretty much knew that already, but it was nice to have the confirmation. But with only 26 points on the practical, it naturally results in failure. He looked down, not wanting to hear any more. His lip quivered and he could feel the tears threatening to fall. He knew he failed already. But that's not the end of the story. What? Please, watch the screen. He looked up from his lap at the screen to see the brunette from the exam, looking worried. Excuse me, but he heard her say to present Mike. That curly-haired boy, with freckles. If it wasn't for the scythe he had, he'd look pretty plain. He watched the pro hero nod. Can you give him some of the points I earned? What? Midoriya gasped in shock. He used up the last minutes of the exam to save me. But he could have gotten so many more points instead. Can you at least give him however many points he passed up trying to save me? Both he and Gami turned to look at each other. That boy, he saved my life. The screen paused, and the duo could hear All Might's voice return. You see, he started in this exam. We weren't just watching for villain-based points. The video then kept going and Present Mike moved to respond to the girl. I'm afraid we can't give him your points. But there shouldn't be a need for it, my little listener. Then the video stopped again, for what the teen assumed to be the last time as All Might's face reappeared on the screen. A hero course that rejects those who do the right thing is no hero course at all. Now the two were intrigued. Where was the hero going with this? Rescue points were also a factor. Another way for UA to evaluate you. Rescue points, like points for saving people. 60 points for Izuku Midoriya, he announced, making the boy fall back into the couch. And while we're at it, 45 points for Ochako Uraraka. That was enough for the boy to let the waterworks fall, but for an entirely different reason than why he was going to before. Though I'm not sure how. All Might huffed under his breath, though both individuals caught it. He then thrusted his hand towards the screen. You're in. The projection stopped after that, but Midoriya's tears didn't. Gami wasn't too sure what to do, so he rubbed his hand onto his successor's back, hoping to calm him down. I did it. He whimpered out. I passed. I am so proud of you. I knew you could do it. He jumped to embrace his mentor tightly. The ghost wasn't expecting it, but happily hugged back. He could feel the waves of happiness rolling off the boy, even as he was crying. They remained like that for a while, until the spirit suggested an idea. You have not visited Ishihara since the exam. Why don't you go tell him the good news? Oh, that would be great, he exclaimed. He would be so proud. The teen stood up and grabbed the paper that had come with the projection device. He didn't even get his backpack or his coat, and flew out the front door, just stopping to grab his keys. He shut the door roughly before running down the sidewalk in the direction of that beautiful, blue house. And, just like that, Midoriya's mood was ruined. Dashed, devastated. He was watching the news right before he had gotten his letter. There should have been no way he could miss a story as big as this. Ishihara's quaint, blue house was partially crushed by a huge chunk of a building. The entire street was blocked off by police and surrounded by civilians. Looking up, the boy realized that an office building the next street over was missing the exact piece that was currently crushing his friend's home. He frantically shoved his way through the crowd and approached the nearest officer. Sir, what happened? The officer turned to look at him, immediately recognizing who he was. Oh, is you, from the sludge villain incident 10 months back. Look, kid, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You can't really be trusted to be this close to the scene. Please, sir, I know the man who lives here. He nearly broke down into tears again. Please, I need to know. The man sighed in exasperation. I can't say much, but there was a pretty nasty villain attack here. His quirk hit that building over there during an altercation with some heroes and it fell on the house. Was there anyone in the house at the time? The officer's shoulders slumped in annoyance. Yeah, there was a man. He sustained pretty severe injuries and was in critical condition when he was rushed to the hospital. Midoriya's hand shot up to his mouth, afraid he was going to throw up. He backed out of the crowd and stumbled on the sidewalk towards him home, nearly dropping the letter from UA. In the process, Izu, I am sure he will be all right. But the team didn't listen. He just wanted to get home. That, or see Ishihara all right. He hadn't spoken to him since before the exam. He actively refused to visit him in the week after he finished the exam, solely because he was afraid of disappointing him. There was no way he could live with himself if something happened to him. The two arrived back home, and Midoriya went right to the TV to turn on the news channel. He sat in front of the TV for the rest of the night until his mother came home, forcing him to evacuate. He didn't even eat any dinner, as much as Gami pushed him to do so. He spent every single second trying to piece together what had happened to the man he had grown to care for so much. The officer wasn't wrong. There was a villain attack in that area, but it didn't start out that close to the blue house. The heroes had pushed the villain by accident into the suburban area, away from the city where it started. The villain had some sort of finger missile quirk, which allowed him to shoot his fingers off his hands like rockets and then regrow them instantly. Whatever they hit, they did serious damage too. Apparently, one of the villain's fingers strayed away from its target and hit that office building instead, causing a good-sized chunk of it to fall down. And it fell right on Ishihara's house. The man was in the house at the time, and like the officer said, was severely injured. The ambulance didn't arrive until almost 10 minutes later, after the villain was restrained. That's why his friend was in such critical condition. He had remained trapped and injured in his own home for nearly 10 minutes. That thought made Midoriya sick. But what made him sicker was the fact that there weren't any updates on his condition. He had no idea how the man was doing. His mother eventually came home, so he moved into his room and turned off the TV. Now, he sat at his desk. He was sketching in one of his notebooks before, but he couldn't will himself to do that anymore. He had sat completely still in the chair for a good while, unsure of what to really do, but eventually settled on doing his job. That needed to get done anyway. He wasn't sure how long he had been working with the little puffs of light. Based on his mentor's begs for him to sleep, he was sure it had at least been 2 hours. But the boy didn't want to sleep. He simply felt too sick to shut his eyes. His head had been phasing in and out after each soul he sent away, not really paying too much attention to their names or their lives. As you please, I understand you are hurting, but you need to sleep. It is nearly 1 in the morning. I can't sleep. I don't want to sleep knowing everything that's happened today. But you have to. At least try. I'll go to sleep in a little bit, he compromised, just not now. Thami sighed, but took the little leeway he had been given. He moved next to his successor and ruffled his hair. Fine, but do not make it too long. Midoriya nodded shakily and reached for another little orb. As it came to him, he could feel the warmth coming off of it. It felt sort of comforting, and he appreciated that in the moment. But as he touched it and the information came flooding to his head, he choked and fell to the floor on his knees. No, he stammered, dropping the soul to clutch his mouth. Izu, what is it? What is wrong? No, he wailed and hunched over. Tommy immediately got the message, but he wasn't sure how to help the distraught boy on the floor. Distraught wasn't even the right word for him at the moment. He was torn, broken, destroyed. The Spectre was worried that the teen's mother might wake up because of the noise, but he couldn't lock the door, so he simply hoped that she was too drunk to even open her eyes. I didn't get to. I never got to. He jumbled up his sentences to the point where the man was having a hard time figuring out what he was saying. He attempted to get closer to his successor when he let out another blood-curdling wail. I quote, "I'm sorry." The noise in the room slowly diminished into pained gasps and sobs. Midoriya still didn't move from his spot on the floor. The small soul he had let go of was now floating right in front of his drooped head. The puff didn't move from its spot either. The room stayed silent other than the cries, but neither person made a move to change that. Not for a long time, anyway. I can't. He finally stuttered out. Izuku, I can't do it. The ghost took that as his cue to move in with the embrace. He knew exactly what Midoriya was experiencing right now. There had been a time where he himself had come face to face with his own loved ones while doing his job. It was painful, to say the very least, but he did realize that no matter where they were when they passed, or who they were with, he always got the last goodbye. I know it hurts right now. He started, hoping to calm the boy enough to at least hold the orb again. But you have the chance to show him before he has to go. The teen's lips shook uncontrollably and ugly. Fat tears streamed down his cheeks, but he still managed to look up at Gami. See, can he hear Mami? The spirit's gaze moved away. Not that the boy could tell. I do not know. But you can still tell him. The boy wasn't sure if he liked that answer, but he managed to get his shaking under control long enough to cup the soul again. He felt the warmth spread throughout his body again, like he was under the morning sun. The ball of light seemed to shine brighter in his hands, but he couldn't tell if that just was from the glint of his tears. Well, I've got full faith that you'll turn out to be someone great. And if you're planning on going into heroics, then I'll just have to keep an ear out for you. He moved the light close to his chest. I meant what I said when we first met. Quirk or not, you are going to be a great hero one day, Midoriya. 2. His tears fell from his face and onto his cupped hands, going right through the orb. Well, I'm not saying you have to prove them wrong, but maybe try not to associate their words with negativity. Kami watched as the boy struggled with what he wanted to say. He knew from personal experience this was really difficult, but as much as he wanted to comfort him, he knew this wasn't the right time to do so. This was Midoriya's moment, and he wasn't going to intrude. Said teen continued to sob, but it was much quieter than before. He felt like an absolute hurricane, as well as an awful person. He wished he could go back in time just to visit him again before today. The guilt that was eating at him wasn't pulling any punches. He wanted to make it up to the man. He wanted to make up for the fact that he hadn't come to visit like he should have. But he didn't know what words to use. What words could ever make up for what he had done? Or more accurately, what he didn't do. He turned his head away and looked towards his desk at random. Even from the floor, he could see the letter from UA. as well as the holographic disc that had announced to him the good news. What a roller coaster of a day it had been, and what he wouldn't give to make it less disastrous. He looked back at the soul in his hands. He almost thought it was staring back at him from the way it glittered. Just make sure to remember your biggest fan when you go pro. Ishihara-san, he began again. The light glowed in response, but Midoriya swore it was just his head messing with him. I did it. I'm going to UA. It didn't take long for spring to arrive, as well as the start of UA, but it sure felt like a while to Midoriya. It had only been a couple months after the entrance exam, but so much had gone down. There was never a dull moment, but every moment felt dull. It was hard for the boy to explain, but Gami seemed to understand it just fine. Ishihara's death had hit him hard. He sometimes found himself walking to the blue house in hopes he could be let inside, only to meet the police tape that surrounded the property. He heard the family had already had the funeral, and as much as he knew he wouldn't get an invitation, it still left him awfully depressed. All he really had were the few plates the man had given to him for taking cookies home. Those ceramic plates stayed on the bottom shelf of the bookcase with his flowers. He would never risk them falling and breaking. But currently, the teen wasn't in the comfort of his room with his flowers and his plates. No, right now, he was in the principal's office at Aldera. His day at school had been as it usually was, except for the teacher telling him that the principal wanted to see him and Bakugo after class. He wasn't sure what the man wanted with him at first, but now he had made it obvious. How wonderful that 2 of our students have made it into UA, the plump man stated. The comment would have been nice if it weren't for the subtle messages he knew the man was pushing. Midoriya opted to stand still towards the back of the office. His gloved hands picked at his uniform pants. He desperately wanted to leave this situation, and he knew Gami felt the same. Said man stood next to his successor, up against the wall. There wasn't much space in the office, so the ghost could feel that a portion of his form was more like in the wall. He also wasn't comfortable in the situation and was ready to head out. Especially you, Midoriya, he continued. Despite the growing tension in the small office, that's a miracle we never expected. The principal's words made him want to puke. He wasn't the quirkless miracle they thought he was. He was strong, he was capable, and he now had the confidence to know that he was all that, even without his powers. Bakugo was also in the office, but stood closer to the principal. His hands were stuffed in his pockets and his shoulders slumped back. Though the blonde hadn't pulled anything too brash since the sludge villain incident, he still wasn't eager to be this close in proximity to him. Eventually, the principal finally stopped talking, and the boy took the opportunity to leave the room. He rushed out of the school, not wanting to be caught with Bakugo after hours. He passed by the courtyard, and the beautiful tree in the center seemed to wave him goodbye. Of course, he knew it was only the wind, but it was nice to pretend sometimes. He entered his alleyway shortcut like he did every day. It was a long path to take, and it always seemed to be dark no matter the time of day. The alleyway still gave the teen chills, but he was constantly on alert. That was a skill he had gratefully picked up after the sludge villain incident, and it hadn't disappointed him yet. So Midoriya knew that Bakugo had followed him into the alleyway. The teen's loud and harsh footsteps betrayed himself enough, even without his keen sense of observation. That didn't mean he was expecting the blonde to shove him up against a building wall. What dirty tricks did you use to do it, you quirkless shit? Bakugo growled and grabbed him by the front of his shirt. He pulled the boy close to his face and yelled again, spit flying everywhere. Huh. Midoriya flinched on reflex, shutting his eyes and raising his gloved hands to protect his face. He was more composed around his other peers, but something about the angry blonde just didn't sit right with him. Maybe it was because they were friends at one point. He didn't really know. I was supposed to be the first and only from this shitty school. He continued furiously and thrusted the teen against the wall once more. You've ruined everything. The timid boy looked to Gami, who was desperately trying to pull Bakugo off of him. When the spirit finally understood that his arms would not solidify and would only continue to pass through the student, he moved to yank on his successor instead. But the minute the specter lifted his head up slightly and made eye contact with the trapped teen, he hesitated. Something in his friend's eyes screamed at him not to intervene, so he backed off warily but kept his guard up. But Bakugo didn't catch the little interaction. His tunnel vision was only focused on his rage. I thought I told you not to try for UA. I told you. Midoriya didn't mean to react, honestly, but his body moved before he could think. He grabbed Bakugo's arm, the one holding him against the alleyway wall, tightly. He burrowed his gloved fingers deep into the uniform's fabric, half hoping to bruise the skin. The teen still kept his head down during all that. His unruly hair dangled over his eyes and blocked the blonde's startled reaction from his sight. Well, I've got full faith that you'll turn out to be someone great. And if you're planning on going into heroics, then I'll just have to keep an ear out for you. As somebody told me, he started shakily, his heart heavy. I meant what I said when we first met. Quirk or not, you are going to be a great hero one day, Midoriya. That I could become a hero. He slammed his feet on the ground, steadying himself. The boy corrected himself. Bakugo, said teen, barely registered the words being said to him. He didn't understand why useless, worthless Deku kept going. All their other classmates had already given up on competing with him, and they had quirks. So why didn't Deku just give up too? Midoriya wasn't sure where this courage was coming from. He had stood up for himself in front of Bakugo before, but it was usually in a more passive way. Never something as brash as yelling back though. But he didn't question it, and just let his mouth run. I earned this. Gami certainly wasn't expecting an outburst from his successor, but that didn't mean he wasn't proud. He knew the boy hated confrontation, as well as the attention that followed. But that just made the few times he snapped all the more prideful to watch. The man knew he couldn't force the boy to be more assertive towards Bakugo or the others, but he was glad that he was growing to be more confident at the very least. That's why The teen locked his grip on the blonde's arm and pulled it off of him impulsively. He couldn't stand how aggressive or touchy Bakugo was, always seeming to creep into his personal space to ridicule him or make him feel miserable. After way too many times of him using his quirk on the shoulder where his father's scar laid, he'd grown to dislike any time Bakugo laid his hands on him, whether it was on said scar or not. But right now, he wasn't focused on the blonde's lack of personal awareness. Sure, he had removed the invasive grip on his collar, but that didn't mean he was done yet. He wasn't the useless, worthless Deku that Bakugo thought he was. He was a changed person. The sludge villain incident changed him. Meeting All Might changed him. The entrance exam changed him. Ishihara's death changed him. Gami's consistent support changed him. And Bakugo needed to realize that. He began to distance himself from the blonde, walking down the alleyway towards the other end. Bakugo, while still in shock, began to go after the teen. But Midoriya quickly turned to face him, his glare stopping the angry boy in his tracks. I'm going to be here no matter what, so get used to it. He didn't need to yell it out or check on Bakugo as he walked out of the alley. He knew the blonde heard him loud and clear. Gami rushed to catch up to the teen. He got to see Bakugo's reaction clearly, and it put a smile on his hidden face. The spirit wasn't expecting such a fierce declaration from his successor, but neither was Bakugo, based on his seething expression. He caught up to the boy right as he turned onto another street, but said boy didn't seem to notice. That was not like you. Midoriya jumped at the sound of his mentor's calm voice. He tightened his grip on his backpack straps. Yeah, sorry about that. I did not mean it like that. Not in a bad way anyway. The normally reserved teen looked up at that. Never mind. It was nice to see you stand up for yourself though. And then the teen looked back down bashfully, but regained his composure. I heard enough already from the principal. I didn't want to hear more from Bakugo of all people. I guess that is understandable. The two continued to walk together, but Gami was merely following his successor. He assumed that they were heading home at first, but the boy didn't turn down the street like he was supposed to. The man didn't question it though, and just kept following without a word. As for Midoriya, he really didn't know where he was going. He was simply walking wherever his feet were taking him. He was a bit shaken after the confrontation with Bakugo in the alleyway, but it felt good to finally tell off the blonde. It was something that didn't happen often, but when it did, it felt like striking gold. But his mind was now wandering aimlessly, just like he was. It didn't really matter where he was going, as long as it was away from that alley. He noticed that he had stopped, so he shook himself out of his thoughts and looked up to figure out where exactly he was. He froze when a partially destroyed quaint, blue house met his gaze. The boy had found himself walking to the house as a force of habit. But as much as he tried not to, he ended up here multiple times a week. Each time he did, the house's perimeter was blocked off by police tape and would only permit him to come so close. But that wasn't an object of complaint for him. He was quite fine with looking out at the friendly house from a distance. Ending up at Ishihara's home wasn't what made him freeze. What made him freeze was the fact that police tape no longer fenced him out. He took a slow step forward, into the area where before, the tape hadn't let him cross. He stopped and listened, but there wasn't any sound. No policeman telling him to leave, no bystanders asking him what he was doing, but also no Ishihara calling him to come inside. It was bittersweet, but he was going to take advantage of the fact that no one was going to tell him no. Midoriya made his way up the front stairs, savoring each step on the weathered, but homey concrete. His hand moved to brush against the metal rails, and though he couldn't feel the smooth steel, the chill still seeped through his glove. It had been such a while since he had gotten to walk up these steps, and it almost made him burst into tears. But he wasn't going to cry out in public, so he forced the tears back in and continued up. When he finally reached the front door, the teen wasn't sure what to do. He wanted to knock, but he was positive no one would answer. He did remember Ishihara going on about his family, but as far as he knew, the older man lived alone. And if someone did answer, what would he say? There wasn't any real reason he was here, other than the pull of something unnatural. No person in their right mind would let a stranger in for no reason, even if that stranger claimed to know the owner of the house. Izu, what are you doing exactly? I don't really know. But even then, the boy made no effort to remove himself from the property. His instincts were telling him to wait, even if those instincts didn't really know what they were waiting for. But his gut hadn't failed him yet, so he gave the feeling a chance and continued to wait right in front of the door. I really think we should get going. That's when the front door opened. At the door was a woman. She looked older, but definitely not as old as Ishihara, and had long, brown hair that nearly reached her mid-chest. She jumped, not expecting him there, but quickly composed herself. She took up an annoyed stance, almost like it hurt her eyes to look at him. "Excuse me," she said snarkily, "but what are you doing here?" Midoriya hesitated, not expecting someone to open the door either. He began to introduce himself even though she hadn't asked his name. I'm Mai. "I know who you are," she interrupted hastily, "you quirkless brat. You're wasting my time, so scram." The teen flinched at the declaration. She must live somewhere in the neighborhood then, if she knew he didn't have a quirk. But he still tried to get a word in. "Please, Ishihara-san," who was at the door. Both parties stopped at that call, though for completely different reasons, but the woman recovered faster and called back. "It's nothing, Takagi, just some quirkless kid," she replied, and then turned to look at the boy, who's about to be leaving. Midoriya shuddered, but didn't move as the unknown voice from before made his way to the front door. "Nonsense, Ishihara-san. I'm coming to see for myself," the voice called out again as the footsteps grew louder. The brown-haired woman seemed to grow a shade paler. No, it's fine, really. There's no need." The puzzled teen shared a glance at the specter next to him, who seemed equally lost. The man just shrugged at his successor, at a loss for what to do. Getting no real helpful advice from the ghost, he decided to just wait and see who came to the door. And right at that thought, a black-haired man in fine clothing met his curious gaze. The man's dark, brown eyes met his own, and he looked away with embarrassment. He hoped this man was more open to what he had to say, if he could get his timid voice to say anything. "Hello," the man began first, to which Midoriya was grateful for. "Who might you be?" I'm Midoriya Izuku, and I was hoping." "Wait," he interrupted. Goodness, was anyone going to let him talk today? "Did you say your name was Midoriya Izuku?" That made the boy do a double take. Yes, and oh, that's wonderful." The death duo shared another quick look of bewilderment before the teen returned his attention to the man in the sharp suit. He was a bit weary of why this man was interested in him, but the cheerful smile in front of him pushed back his worries enough to hear him out. The man must have picked up on his hesitation, because he started to backtrack. Sorry. Let me introduce myself. I'm Takagi Masa, and I'm the Ishihara family's executor." He then gestured to the brown-haired woman that had answered the door originally. "This is Ishihara Tadao's daughter, Ishihara Kohoni." The newly introduced Kohoni coughed. "Takagi, what are you doing?" "We have work to do." Takagi simply flashed her a bright smile, before continuing on with his tangent. "I'm sure you already know, but as the Ishihara family's executor, I'm in charge of making sure that Ishihara Tadao's will is properly taken care of." Midoriya, in fact, did not know this. Between training for UA and keeping out of trouble at Aldera, he hadn't had the chance to brush up on legal studies. But he merely nodded his head and let the man keep talking. Ishihara Tadao did name one Midoriya Izuku in his will, but hadn't left any way to contact him. "I was wondering how I was going to get in touch with you, but the universe works in mysterious ways, it seems." That statement definitely caught the teen's interest. Ishihara has left him something in his will. That certainly surprised him, though he hadn't had the faintest idea of what it could be. "Well, why don't you come inside, Midoriya-kun, since we'll need to talk things out." The boy barely croaked out a response. Sure, I guess." Takagi then ushered him inside, to the shock of Kohoni, but she composed herself enough to come back in as well. Tommy was left alone, wondering if he should really intrude on a matter this sensitive, but he decided to join his successor just in case. He quickly phased through the door to catch up. By the time he did, Midoriya was now sitting at the home's small dining room table with Takagi, Kohoni observing from the kitchen doorway. He could tell the teen was nearly in tears. And not only because he was finally back in the house. The spirit recalled Ishihara patching up the boy a few years back at that very table, where he later came out as quirkless. That day was momentous to his successor, as he finally had the support of someone other than the ghost himself. But Gami stopped reminiscing when the raven-haired man piped up again. "Normally, we wouldn't do things here," he started, "but you just so happened to catch Ishihara-san and I finalizing the details of her portion of the will." The teen nodded in understanding, waiting for the man to continue. "Luckily, your visit still works out pretty well, since I've already set aside the items bestowed to you." Takagi reached over to a stack of paper on the dining room table and shuffled through them. He pulled out a few sheets from the center and laid them out in front of the boy. He picked them up to examine them, but the man started talking again. "Because you're under 18, as the executor, I'm supposed to hold on to your inheritance until you come of age. But the items you've inherited hold little monetary value from a legal standpoint, so I can offer you them now." Midoriya picked out his name in the set of papers that Takagi had handed him. He really was written into Ishihara's will. But he couldn't find what his inheritance was in the mass vomit of words. He looked up to the executor, finally realizing he had stopped talking. "Do I need a lawyer for this?" The man chuckled. "Typically I would recommend one when dealing with inheritance, but like I said before, what you've inherited is of so little monetary value that it's really not necessary. Though, the decision is still entirely up to you." The teen eyed his mentor briefly, hoping that was enough to catch the spirit's attention. Thankfully, it was. "I only remember dealing with a few inheritance proceedings in my time, but from what I do know, I think you are all right." He gave a curt nod in acknowledgement before moving to respond. "I guess I'm good then." "Oh, wonderful. You've saved me quite a bit of time, Midoriya-kun." "Oh, I love how clean this is turning out to be." Midoriya, Gami, and Kohoni watched in silence as Takagi sang praises to himself. For dealing with a deceased's will, the man was oddly bubbly, but the boy guessed it came with the job. Takagi seemed to realize he was making a scene and calmed himself down enough to continue with the proceeding. "Well, Midoriya-kun, follow me." He stood up from his chair, prompting the teen to get up as well. "I've laid out your inheritance in the living room." The suited man walked out of the dining room abruptly, so he dashed after him. Gami didn't trail behind as far, interested to see how the situation played out. The last to leave the room was Kohoni, who was a bit annoyed, but also surprisingly intrigued. The boy had to stop himself, nearly crashing into Takagi. The executor seemed a bit hasty in his actions, and that was starting to get on his nerves, but the man has been nothing but nice to him, so he refused the urge to call him out. He stayed close behind as the man slowly walked into the room, but still couldn't see much. "Here it all is," he stated and moved out of the way, allowing Midoriya a perfect view of the coffee table. On said table was a cardboard box, carefully folded together and taped. Only the top flaps were left open, so he cautiously made his way over to peer inside. Gami too was curious, but opted to let his successor take the first peek. Midoriya wasn't going to lie, he was nervous. He really wasn't sure what to expect in the box, but he knew it wasn't going to be anything bad. He wished he could tell that to his brain though. His hands were shaky and sweaty, and the boy was afraid he wouldn't be able to open the box like this. Still, he willed up any confidence he had left and slowly lifted open the flaps. The first thing that caught his eye was a glint of sunlight. It nearly blinded him, so he had to step back. But upon further examination, there wasn't a miniature sun in the box. Instead, there was something silver that reflected the sunlight coming in from the window. He carefully lifted the silver object out to get a better look, and almost dropped it out of shock. It was a beautiful, silver kettle with an antique finish. He quickly switched to holding it by the thin handle as to not smudge the polished surface. It looked so pristine, so he assumed it was unused and kept away in an attic or something. But when he turned it over to check, he could see the scorch marks it wore from time over a stove. That nearly brought him to tears. But not for the reasons you'd expect. The searing on the bottom of the kettle merely confirmed to the boy that this was most likely the kettle Ishihara used to prepare tea for the two of them. Clearing his consciousness, he gently set the kettle down onto the coffee table and moved to look in the cardboard box again. Inside, the next thing his eyes picked out was a notebook with a light brown cover, so he wrapped his fingers around the slightly worn spine to pull it out. At first glance, he wasn't sure exactly what the book contained, as it had no words on the cover, so he tenderly flipped through the pages. But he couldn't tell what the book was about even then, so he stopped on a random page to examine the scrawls. After reading the first few lines, he figured out it was a recipe. Going back to look at the other pages, the teen realized that the whole book was full of baking recipes. Cookies and pastries that Ishihara loved to bake and serve when he came over. That actually brought him to tears, so he placed the book down next to the kettle before those droplets fell. Takagi watched the boy grow more and more emotional at unboxing the items left for him. The executor smiled warmly at the sight. He knew firsthand how emotionally valuable inheritance could be, despite whatever its monetary value was. Honestly, he was glad it wasn't worth much, or else he would have had to hold on to it by the terms of his position. Kohoni was practically indifferent to the situation, but not without curiosity. She wondered what relations this kid had possessed with her father. By now she had lost most of her hostility towards him, but that didn't mean she was eager to be around him. Midoriya figured he had wasted enough of Takagi and Kohoni's time crying, so he wiped his eyes and reached into the cardboard box again. There was one last thing inside, so he grabbed it with both hands and lifted it out. The item was a wooden box, and a bit heavier than he expected. He put the box down onto the coffee table and ran a gloved hand over the smooth wood. It had a golden clasp on the front, so he popped it open and raised the lid. When the sight of the chest set he and Ishihara played with met his gaze, the waterworks went into overdrive. He collapsed onto his knees and held the open box tightly to his chest as he sobbed, startling the two others, as well as the ghost, still in the room. Gami quickly moved into action, floating over to assist in any way he could. But it was Kohoni who actually said the first coherent sentence. "What is it?" She craned her neck to try and get a better look, a chest set. "Indeed, Ishihara-san," Takagi replied. "That, along with the kettle and recipe book, were specifically left for Midoriya-kun in the will." Said boy seemed to compose himself enough to close the box and get back up on his feet. He sniffled out a quiet, "little sorry" before placing the chest set back into the cardboard box. "Nonsense," the suited man interrupted. "These situations are always emotional." The teen rubbed the stray tears from his eyes and wiped his wet hands on his school uniform. He made sure his hands were dry enough before grabbing the recipe book and kettle to put them into the box as well. The brunette woman broke the silence again, her nosiness getting the better of her. "What exactly was your relationship with my father?" Midoriya was startled at the seemingly sincere question directed at him, especially from a person so hostile towards him at first. But he took the time to think about it. There were so many ways he could describe the relationship he had with Ishihara, and yet not enough words. He didn't take too long though, just to ensure the woman's patience didn't run out. He finished packing away the 3 items and shut the cardboard box. He placed a hand onto the top to force the 2 open flaps down. Ishihara-san was a really close friend. Kohoni looked shocked. "That's it." The boy laughed and picked up the cardboard box carefully, making sure not to disturb any of the items inside. "Well, I'd like to believe he thought the same of me. But I'm sure he had many friends other than myself." The younger Ishihara scoffed. "Well, obviously," Midoriya continued despite the quip. "And while I'm sure I was not Ishihara-san's first friend, he was most certainly mine." Takagi's smile fell a bit, but he picked it back up before anyone could notice. The brown-haired woman didn't make any outward expressions, but she swore she felt a sharp tug on her heartstrings. Kami wasn't hurt at that declaration. It was technically the truth. The older man was his successor's first human friend. Besides, the Spectre was already aware that he would forever be the Og. The teen paused at that and took a moment to reminisce. Ishihara was a lot of firsts for him. He was the first person he had a premonition about, and the first person he saved. He was the first person who had ever invited him over, and the first person to bake treats for him. He was the first person who had ever patched him up, and the first person who supported his dreams. The boy held the cardboard box close to his chest, squeezing it tightly in his arms. "I'm really thankful to have known him." The first day of UA arrived faster than Midoriya thought it would, but he was ready. He set his phone alarm early for that morning, even earlier than he normally got up for his deathly duties. He wanted to give himself plenty of time to pack and prepare. The last thing he wanted to do was arrive late on the very first day. Kami had helped him pack the night before though, so he didn't feel at all stressed waking up this morning. He straightened out his new UA uniform, the gray a nice change from the black of Aldera. The spirit had attempted to teach the boy how to do his tie, but his efforts were fruitless. He still walked out of the house that morning with a poorly done, fat tie, as well as his signature red sneakers and his black leather bag. The subway ride didn't feel as long as it was, and evidently enough, the duo walked down the beautiful path they had taken before for the entrance exams. Just as the teen had hoped, the trees now grew luscious green leaves on their branches and framed the walkway luxuriously. He almost wished he could spend the whole day out here, but knew that wasn't an option. He calmly strolled down the halls of the prestigious school, looking for his class. He had studied the map that came with the acceptance letter, but still managed to forget where he was going in the awe of observing every nook and cranny. Thankfully, the ghost had looked at the map as well, and was now leading the boy down the right hall. The two finally arrived at a large door that read 1A on it in big, bold lettering. They both stopped to stare mesmerizingly at it. "Well, that is certainly one massive entryway," Midoriya chuckled. "It has to be accessible to everyone, no matter their quirks." But after that, he felt his laughter die off to replace his nervousness. Once he entered that classroom, he'd be in a room full of the best of the best. That thought made his heart sputter. Did he deserve to be here? Even though he technically didn't have a quirk, he did have powers. Did that make his acceptance count, or was it a petty excuse? What if he was taking this spot from someone else who really deserved it? His head started to spiral again, but Kami caught it before he could fall any deeper. "Just remember that you earned your spot here," he spoke softly. "You took the same exam as everyone else, and you came out on the very top." The boy smiled up at his mentor. "Yeah, you're right." He moved his gloved hands to grip at the sliding door and pulled it open slowly. His mind drifted back to Bakugo in the moment, as well as the other kid that embarrassed him from the entrance exam, but he shook it off the best he could. "Let's just hope they're in the other class," he remarked to no one. "Who?" And that's when the door opened up all the way to reveal the blue-haired boy yelling strictly at Bakugo right near the front of the room. "Never mind, I think I know who. Remove your foot from that desk." The strict boy from the exam berated. "Such an action is insulting to those who came to UA before us as well as the craftsman who made the desk." "Like I care," the blonde scoffed, not moving his foot. "What middle school are you from, extra?" Midoriya deadpanned. It was just his luck that both kids happened to be in his class. He wasn't sure how he'd deal with Bakugo, but he hoped at the very least he could get on good terms with the other boy. Said boy gasped at Bakugo's response, but answered the question, "I'm from Sumi Private Academy. My name is Ida Tenya." "Sumi," he repeated with a smug grin, "a stuck-up elitist, then? I should blow you to bits." Ida grew even more flabbergasted. "Blow me to bits? Do you really wish to become a hero?" It was then that Ida noticed the green-haired boy standing nervously in the doorway. He shuffled over to him to introduce himself again. "Oh dear, I'm from Sumi Private Academy." The teen started again. "Ah, I heard you from before," he interrupted, not really wanting to hear the same spiel from before. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Pleased to meet you, Ida." "Midoriya," Ida mumbled out, causing said teen to flinch. That name reminded him too much of home. Maybe he could get his classmates to call him by a nickname or something. You perceived the true nature of that practical exam. Well, I did not. The reserved boy and his mentor shared a look. He hadn't really perceived anything during the exam. He simply did what was right. He couldn't just stand and watch as the nice brunette got hurt, or as the giant robot tore up the mock city. He wasn't expecting to get any points, much less 60 rescue points. But he wasn't complaining. "I misjudged you." Goodness, was that boy still talking. "I hate to admit it, but you were the superior candidate." "Ah, well, I only did what I thought was right," he whispered, not enjoying the attention he was getting from the other kids in the classroom. I'm going to go sit down now." He started walking away from the blunt male. This was definitely not how he wanted to start his first day, but if he walked away from the spotlight now, there was still a chance he could get away with a quiet rest of the day. Though, it didn't seem like the universe wanted that for him, because just as he attempted to move away from Ada, the class door opened again. "That curly hair, it's you." Midoriya recognized the voice, but he still jolted from surprise. He turned around and sure enough, it was the nice girl from the entrance exam. He smiled softly and tried to make his way to his seat. The brunette didn't seem to realize his discomfort though, and walked right up to him. "You got in, just like President Mike said." She cheered enthusiastically, pumping her fist into the air. "It makes sense though. That swing was awesome." The timid teen grew more nervous at her loud and bubbly personality, but at feeling the ghost run a cold, bony hand through his hair, he calmed down enough to respond. Well, I have to thank you for speaking on my behalf." Gami just listened as the talkative girl rambled on and on to his successor. He took the time to examine the other kids in the classroom. There are certainly a variety of quirks to say the least, and each student looked unique, but his gaze inevitably landed on the seething blonde. The spirit could tell Bakugo wasn't happy about the arrival of his friend, but he hadn't made any attempts to quip at him yet, much less attack him. That was definitely an improvement from Aldra, so the Spectre wasn't too upset. "So we got our entrance ceremony and guidance sessions today, right?" Gami wondered if all these kids just liked to talk, or if his successor was just quieter than he thought. But nonetheless, she hadn't waited for a response before continuing. "I wonder what our teacher will be like. Boy, am I nervous." Midoriya chuckled nervously. He felt the same way, but he was eager to go sit down. They were still at the front of the classroom and he could feel the eyes on the two of them. He wondered where the teacher was, considering he still wasn't in the classroom yet. "If you're here to socialize, then get out." "Ah, speak of the devil and he shall appear." He watched the brunette turn around towards the open door in shock, and he turned to look as well. And while he didn't know what to expect considering his homeroom teacher, he certainly wasn't prepared to see a haggard-looking man wrapped up in a yellow sleeping bag. He pulled his hand out of the bag, along with what looked to be a juice pouch. He gave the pouch a nice, long suck, before moving to stand up. He unzipped the sleeping bag and let it fall to his feet, revealing his outfit, which consisted of a black jumpsuit and a familiar gray scarf. "Oh my god, that's Pro Hero Eraserhead." The teen's analytic mind snapped into overdrive. "This is certainly interesting." "It took 8 seconds for you to quiet down," the rugged man stated bluntly. "Time is a precious resource. You lot aren't very rational, are you?" The class didn't really know how to react to the man, or his declaration. Many simply gaped like fish. The man didn't waste any time though and continued talking. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Pleased to meet you." Once the man introduced himself, Midoriya was sure he was Eraserhead. If the scarf didn't give him away, the name surely did. He was arguably the boy's favorite underground hero ever, and had a few pages in a notebook dedicated to him, his quirk, and his fighting style. Of course, it was unlikely that his other classmates had ever heard of him, since he really tried to stay out of the media spotlight. But he wasn't about to call the man out, since the teacher obviously didn't introduce himself as Eraserhead for some reason. "Change into your gym clothes and out to the grounds," he said. Not skipping a beat, "Your clothes should be in a locker assigned to you in the class locker rooms." The teen didn't want to be the first person to leave the room, so he hesitated and let Ada, along with some other students, leave first before following them to the locker room. "That was Eraserhead, correct?" Gami inquired. He nodded subtly, trying not to draw any attention to himself. He walked into the locker room and looked for his own. All of the lockers had numbers plated onto them, but also had sticky notes as well. He assumed that the sticky notes had their names on them, so he searched for his. Finally finding it, he opened the door to see his gym clothes, which were a dark blue with white lines that spelled out the school's initials. Quickly unfolding them, he realized the tops were short-sleeved. Luckily, he had come prepared just in case. Placing his backpack into the locker, he opened it and pulled out a black, long-sleeved turtleneck. He had purchased a few more of these shirts, thin and moisture-wicking for any sort of summer activity. He had placed one of them in his bag in the event he needed it for school, not really expecting to be out on the grounds on the first day though. Midoriya closed his locker and moved towards the bathroom stalls. All the other boys were changing out in the open, but he wasn't too keen on revealing his scars. He knew the burn one would attract a lot of attention at the very least, and that was definitely something he didn't want. He knew some kids were giving him weird looks, but he tried not to pay any attention. He opened one of the stall doors and walked in with his gym clothes and turtleneck. It was a good thing you decided to bring that with you. The teen hummed out a noise of approval, taking off his uniform top to slip on the turtleneck. The neck was tall enough to cover the bit of the burn scar that peeked out of his uniform, and the sleeves reached all the way to his wrist to shield his other injuries from view. And that was just the way he liked it. Do not let them get to you. They are just being curious. I know, he whispered under his breath. He figured there would be stares if he decided not to change out in the open, so he wasn't too surprised when he was proven correct. That was simply the nature of curiosity. When someone acts out of the ordinary, it draws attention. He was used to it, though. One stare remained on him a bit longer than the others, and returned once he left the stall as well. The boy didn't notice it, but Kami certainly did. At first, the old ghost assumed it was Bakugo, but a certain head of candy cane hair made him reassess his initial assumptions. The Quirk test Midoriya had hung around the back of the class once he got outside. He wore the gym clothes just like everyone else, just with his black turtleneck underneath. It covered the parts of his neck and arms that his gym uniform did not, paired with his usual black, polyester gloves, and he was comfortable and ready to go. He and Gami tuned into the conversation currently playing out. What about the entrance ceremony? Or the guidance sessions? He heard the nice brunette from before exclaim. He really needed to learn her name. You don't have time to waste on that stuff if you want to become heroes, Aizawa began. At that, hushed murmurs grew from the class, so the teacher proceeded speaking. UA is known for its freestyle educational system, he continued, and the whispers died down. That applies to us teachers as well. Aizawa walked over to what the teen presumed to be an area for softball throwing, and beckoned the class to follow. The new first years shuffled over nervously, including Midoriya. Just because he knew that man was a racerhead didn't make him any less intimidating. Actually, the pro was probably more intimidating with the knowledge that he was such a scarily effective underground hero, despite his non-offensive quirk. Softball throwing, standing long jump, 50-meter dash, endurance running. The boy was confused at first why the hero was listing basic exercises, but he then realized that those were the kind of tests that he had done in gym class back at Aldera. Of course, he didn't say anything, and the teacher continued. Grip strength, side-to-side stepping, upper body training, seated toe touch. He looked towards his mentor, who seemed a bit puzzled. I guess it was fair to assume the man didn't perform anything like standardized athletics testing during his adolescence. He doubted there even was standardized athletics testing 5 centuries ago. You all did these in middle school? Yes. Aizawa addressed the confused looks in the crowd. Your standard, Quirk-salo gym tests. The homeroom teacher scoffed seemingly at his own statement. This country still insists on prohibiting quirks when calculating the averages of those records. It's not rational. The Department of Education is simply procrastinating. Midoriya couldn't deny what the pro was saying. The education system was sorely behind when it came to implementing transitions for quirks in the classroom. He remembered Aldera's rules when it came to quirks, not only the ones pertaining to use in general. His middle school allowed a lot of unfair treatment depending on the quirk a student had. Bakugo and himself were prime examples. He had hoped for some changes while he was still in middle school, whether by Aldera or by the department themselves, but he knew not to expect anything. As they say, hope for the best and expect the worst. Midoriya, Aizawa called out, startling the boy out of his thoughts. Where are you? Right here, sir. He responded passively, moving to the front of the crowd. Gami moved up with him, passing right through the other students. The tired-looking hero eyed his extra clothing, but chose not to call him out. Instead, he continued on his tangent. You came first in the entrance exam, correct? The gruff man didn't wait for a response. How far could you throw in middle school? The teen shuffled a bit at being called out, and grew more nervous at the whispers coming from his classmates. He picked at his gloved fingers in an attempt to calm himself down. 46 meters, sir. Great, now try it with your quirk. Do whatever you need to. Just don't leave the circle. He simply nodded and walked into the circle drawn on the ground. Aizawa tossed him the ball and he caught it snappily. He could pick out Bakugo's voice yell out loudly over the crowd. "Ha, what's Deku gonna do? He's just a quirkless runt." Ada stepped right in to defend him. "Quirkless? So you haven't heard about his feats during the entrance exam?" The two then devolved into squabbles, but Midoriya tried not to listen in. He was stressed enough as it was. Gami ran a hand through his successor's hair, hoping to ease him. The pro seemed to have caught on to the boy's hesitation, so he added a short comment of encouragement. "Give it all you got." He nodded softly at the advice and tossed the ball from hand to hand. He opted to take off his gloves, but decided against it, deeming it not necessary. He quickly glanced to the side to look at his mentor, who stood outside the circle as to not get in his way. "Do not worry about Bakugo or the others," the spirit reassured. "This is your next step." "Yeah," the teen mumbled. He shook off his nervousness for now. He didn't want to waste any more of his teacher's time. He had done enough hesitating, so he decided to just jump in head first. He threw the ball directly above him, as high as he could. He could hear the startled gasps from his classmates, as they were most likely assuming he would throw it forward. But he didn't have any time to think about them. He was completely focused on launching this ball as far as he could. This was his shot, and he was going to take it. As the ball was in the air, Midoriya flexed his right hand and summoned his sai. Quickly grabbing it with his other hand, he lifted it behind his head. He only had a single moment before the ball fell back down. But he poured as much DT as he could into his weapon. He could also hear the breaths of shock at the sight of the massive scythe. But he ignored them as well. He could feel a tiny tingle at the base of his spine, but paid it little attention. The teen watched the ball begin to fall back down to earth. He was hoping to pull the same stunt he used to take down the zero-pointer. So once the ball got right where he wanted it, he let his weapon come down. "I'll prove my worth right here and now." He knew the scythe didn't hit the ball, but that was his plan. He could hear his class yell and cry in surprise as his weapon audibly tore through the air. And just like the swing with the zero-pointer, a loud explosion rang as the shockwave sent the ball flying. It took a few seconds, but eventually the ball came crashing down. A few beeps came from Aizawa's direction, so he turned to look and faced the shocked expressions of his classmates. "It's important for us to know our limits," the teacher started up. He showed the crowd, as well as Midoriya, the monitor that recorded his score. The screen flashed and then showed an impressive score of 1,139.6 meters. "That's the first rational step towards figuring out what kind of heroes you'll be." Aizawa was arguably more shocked than the other kids, but not for the same reasons. He flashed his own quirk right as Midoriya had swung his weapon, and was flabbergasted that nothing had happened. He wasn't sure how that was even possible, since his quirk was obviously not a mutant one. He was going to have to pull the kid after the tests and take him to Nezu for an explanation. But right now, he kept himself composed and proceeded with his plans. Bakugo would probably give the pro a run for his money though. He was completely bewildered at what had just happened before his eyes. But his shock quickly turned to rage as his palms started sparking. "What the hell? Explain yourself, Deku." The blonde screamed as he charged at the shy boy with his explosions firing off in every direction. Midoriya flinched and his scythe disappeared out of stress. He raised his gloved hands to shield his face from the incoming attack. He didn't notice that the tips of his gloves started to disintegrate without him meaning to. Gami initially shied away from the amount of light being produced, but he sprung into action. He figured he wasn't going to turn solid to stop Bakugo, so he prepared himself to yank his successor out of the way. It was then that the blonde was halted in his tracks, a few strands of cloth wrapping themselves around his body. His explosions also stopped completely, but he didn't seem to realize that. "What the?" he grimaced. "This cloth. It's stiff." "It's a capture weapon made of carbon fibers and a special alloy wire," Aizawa corrected. "And geez, stop using your quirk already." That was when Bakugo realized his explosions had stopped. He looked back at the teacher, but continued to struggle against his binds. "I'm getting serious dry eye over here." Midoriya moved a bit away from the raging blonde, but let his excitement take over at seeing his favorite underground hero in action. "Wow, you really are a racerhead." The class began whispering again. And that's when the teen realized he had just said that out loud. He looked down embarrassingly as the pro released Bakugo from his capture weapon. "So you know of me, kid?" the teacher questioned. "I try to stay out of the media." Well, your quirk is pretty interesting," he mumbled. "And I do analysis as a hobby." He didn't say any more than that, so Aizawa proceeded to get the rest of the test going. He could tell this was going to be a long day. The boy returned to the group, where he was swamped by Ada, the brunette, and a few other classmates. "Well," she cried, "now that's a hero-like record if I ever saw one." "Indeed," Ada observed, thinking back on the entrance exam. "That is certainly a strange, but powerful quirk." Midoriya smiled and thanked them for their nice words, but was eager to be out of the spotlight. "Nice swing. You are getting better at that move." He huffed in content at the ghost, but made it seem as if he was panting for breath. The class seemed to realize that the tension from before was gone, and immediately grew excited at the prospect of using their quirks. Comments flew left and right from the rest of the students. Whoa, this is awesome. 1,139 meters. Seriously? So we can use our quirks for real? Man, the hero course is great. This is going to be fun. Both the teen and his mentor noticed how annoyed their teacher was growing. The Spectre personally knew that look the man was giving, and figured he was just about to snap. Fun you say, he stated eerily. Aizawa turned slowly to stare at the group of first years and loomed over them. He held up his hand to examine it, but neither of the death duo could figure out why. Midoriya believed it was symbolic. Gami believed it was personal. You're hoping to become heroes after 3 years here, he growled lowly. And you think it'll be all fun and games. The class shut up at that, but it was too late. Everyone could tell the mood shifted again, and their teacher was pissed. All right then, Aizawa replied sarcastically. The one with the lowest score across all 8 events will be judged as hopeless. He could hear the cries of protests begin to emerge at his declaration, but it would not change his mind. They had pushed the normally nonchalant pro over the edge, and will be expelled. Midoriya's eyes widened at his teacher's words, but his reaction was nothing compared to the loud complaints of his classmates. Gami wasn't all that surprised, honestly. It wasn't like he was attached to any of the kids here except his successor, and the ghost had full faith that his friend would do fine. The lowest score will be expelled. The nice girl from the entrance exam repeated. It's only the first day. I mean, even if it weren't. That's totally unfair. Aizawa ran a tired hand through his hair and looked over to her. Natural disasters, highway pileups, rampaging villains. The world is full of unfairness. The green-haired teen was brought back to the sludge villain incident. It had only been a matter of luck that he ended up encountering the villain underneath the overpass that day, and a matter of even worse luck that the villain had escaped and captured Bakugo later on. A lot of things ran through his mind that day, and the days after, but never the thought that it was unfair. He was more grateful that the villain decided to attack him actually, as he had the ability to restrain him. He couldn't imagine if some other unfortunate soul ended up crossing paths instead. That would have been unfair. Heroes are the ones who correct all of that unfairness. The boy's hand twitched at that statement. There was nothing incorrect about it from a rational standpoint, but he knew from experience that it wasn't true for all heroes. If you were hoping for a nice, easy 3 years here, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, the pro grilled. We'll run you through the ringer. Midoriya looked nervously over to his companion, but found no hesitance in his ghostly friend. Of course, it was always a bit difficult to tell, but he had gotten better at it over the years. His worries eased away at the spirit's confidence. That's plus ultra, Aizawa finished. Show me it's no mistake that you're here. The boy first was afraid he shouldn't be here, that he took someone else's rightful spot at UA, that it was a mistake that he was here. But now, he felt the determination flush out any hesitance he had left. We've wasted enough time talking. Let's get started. Bring it on, I'm ready. The first event was the 50-meter dash. He was unsure of how any of his abilities could really help him here. The obvious answer would be to propel himself with another shockwave, but that would likely cause massive damage to the buildings near the track, as well as any students standing too close. And once he realized they were racing in pairs, he knew there would be no way he could fire off a blast without hurting the person next to him. So Midoriya opted to just rely on his natural speed. He watched with interest as the boy from the exam, Ada, prepared to race against a girl who slightly resembled a frog. He wasn't sure what Aether's quirk was, but he knew he was about to find out. As the starting noise sounded, both took off with surprising speed. He watched as smoke plumed from the tubes in Ada's legs, and that confirmed his initial guess about the student's quirk from the entrance exam. It must be a speed-boosting quirk. He easily outran the other girl, and the robot at the end of the 50 meters announced his score to be an impressive 3.04 seconds. The teen hadn't caught much about the girl he was racing against, but based on her form and how she hopped along the track instead of running, he determined she had a frog-based quirk. He noticed her long tongue when it escaped her mouth as she was jumping, and that only strengthened his guess. She had scored 5.58 seconds. Not as fast as Ida's, but still impressive. The next two to go were the brunette and another student with a tail. He had a good idea what the girl's quirk was, as he'd seen it in action in the entrance exam. At first, he thought she could make things float, but as he watched her touch her clothes right before the race began, he figured out it must have something to do with gravity. She only scored 7.15 seconds, but Midoriya couldn't really see how she could have done anything different to boost her score. He continued to watch as other students raced, wondering who he would be paired with. As students got called and the list narrowed, the boy felt his gut sink and hoped the universe would have mercy on him. It did not. Students 17 and 18, Aizawa called out. He walked up to the track. The teen was number 18, but he paled when he saw who 17 was. It being Bakugo, of course. He noticed that Gami stood on the sidelines still. It made sense. His mentor was probably worried about the light that would come off Bakugo's quirk. The ghost did a slow fist pump at him, and he almost snorted at how awkward it looked. But he was officially calmed down now and ready to run. Midoriya noted that the blonde currently had his arms crossed in front of his face. He knew his quirk would be beneficial to this test, and he put that at the back of his head. The starting noise reached his ears, and like instinct, he took off. He heard Bakugo shout something, but he wasn't too focused on it. The boy's explosion-propelled body was flying up next to him, but the teen moved accordingly to dodge a stray blast coming at his head. His pace didn't change though, and he made it to the finish line a hair behind his former friend. Bakugo had scored an imposing 4.13 seconds, but that was to be expected. Kami flew over to him after he crossed the line. "What did you score?" I could not hear over the explosions. The teen smiled briefly. 6.32. Much better than middle school. The Spectre could see the pride that radiated off his successor. It was nice seeing him like this, genuinely happy and proud of himself. The second event was grip strength. Midoriya knew none of his abilities could help him here, unless he wanted to disintegrate the machine. So he simply focused all his energy on squeezing the life out of the machine currently in his right hand. It was nothing too spectacular, just 56 kilograms, but he was content nonetheless. There weren't too many quirks that could help out with this, but one kid with what looked to be multiple arms did score a striking 540 kilograms. Then came the standing long jump. At first, the teen thought he'd have to do this one without any assistance again, since the shockwave from his scythe would again be too risky. But a crazy idea struck him right as he was called up. Kami once again watched from the sidelines. But upon seeing a tint of madness in the boy's eyes, he was debating whether to intervene. He took a deep breath at the start, before performing the test as he usually would. He poured his strength into his back legs and leapt. But right as he hit the peak of his jump, he flexed his gloved hand to summon his weapon. Then, with both hands, he slammed the blade into the sand, the long handle now sticking up. As he fell, he reached for the handle again, towards the highest part of it. Once he felt the familiar grain of the wood, even through his gloves. Midoriya used it as support to fling himself off of it, traveling even further than he would have with a normal jump. He touched down onto the sand with both feet a bit roughly, but stable as well, a wide grin on his face. Kami rushed over to congratulate him. That was quite ingenious. Noticing a few of his classmates' eyes on him, he nodded his head instead of verbally responding. Aizawa was actually one of those eyes, impressed by the boy's creative use of his abilities. But in the back of the pro's mind, he knew that the kid was hiding something about his quirk. The fact that he couldn't erase it earlier confirmed that. The next event was sidestepping, and the teen performed under average for that. But he wasn't too worried based on how he was currently doing overall. Besides, not many students exceeded on this test. The only one that stood out was a small, purple-haired kid that was using rubber-like balls from his head to bounce from side to side. Next was the ball toss. For this one, he got to sit out as he had already performed it before. He watched as his classmates attempted using their quirks to launch the ball. Some were successful, like the nice brunette who scored an infinity by making the ball float into space. Others were not, like the one pink girl who seemingly tried to launch the ball with her acid. Unfortunately, the ball just melted instead. When Bakugo walked up for his turn though, Midoriya grew curious. He was positive the blonde would just launch the ball with an explosion. But he was wondering how far it would go. He walked into the circle and stretched out his arms as the teacher tossed him the ball. "Die!" Bakugo shouted as an enormous explosion ripped through the air. The ball zoomed off into the sky. After a few seconds, the ball bounced to the ground and Aizawa held up the screen with his score, 705.2 meters. The class was thoroughly awestruck at the score, including the reserve teen, but Bakugo seemed to react in the complete opposite way. He growled and dug his fingernails into his palm. How had he scored lower than Deku, who was supposed to be quirkless? And by over 400 meters. He was livid with everything, and his usual seething grew to the point where his hands started smoking. Of course, the pro hero noticed, but recorded it for later. He realized that the blonde held some sort of animosity towards the green-haired kid. That may be an issue later. The sixth event was a display of upper body strength, and despite not finding a way to use any of his powers, he still scored over average. The months of training at Dagobah really paid off. Plus, he naturally had to have a lot of upper body strength to swing around his weapon. After that came the endurance test. And again, he still scored really well even without his powers. Years of escaping bullies at Alder as well as his nightly endurance runs really built up a reservoir of stamina. He was one of the last kids left running on the track and felt proud of that, especially since one of the few kids that outdid him was on a scooter for goodness sake. Midoriya was sure that the student, a girl with spiky, black hair, would place first overall. Her quirk, which he was sure was some sort of creation quirk, was really well-rounded and contributed to every test. Last was the seated toe touch. The teen didn't do so well on this one, but he wasn't that worried. He scored a bit under average again, but it wasn't too bad compared to everyone else. And with that, the events were over. Aizawa grouped the class together once more so he could talk. Moving along, it's time for the results, he explained, pulling out a remote from his back pocket. The pro pressed a button on it and a screen popped up in front of everyone. Upon closer examination, the boy figured out it was a list of everyone's placement overall. Gami realized this too, and the two scoured the list for his name. He found his name, ranked third out of the class overall. To be honest, the teen wasn't expecting to place that high. He knew he did well enough to not place last, but he was sure his scores weren't all that impressive. He guessed that his ball toss score really carried him, along with the standing long jump and the endurance run. He looked at the places above and below him. In first was the girl with the creation quirk. As he expected, now learning her name was Yaoyorozu Momo. Right above him in second was someone named Todoroki Shoto. He wasn't sure which student that was, but he swore the name felt familiar, at least, the family name did. He was sure he had heard that name before, somewhere. And right below him were Bakugo in fourth and Ida in fifth. Being above both made his heart swell with pride, and he considered them both powerful and talented on their own. Though, he wasn't sure how happy said blonde would be once he realized he was above him. His eyes then traveled all the way down to last place, to see the name Minta Minoru. Again, he hadn't really acquainted himself with his classmates yet, so he was unsure of who that was. But he followed the group's eyes to the small, purple-haired kid that had exceeded on the sidestepping test. The student was shaking and sniffling, realizing that he was going home. Most of the class looked at him with pitiful gazes. Also, Aizawa interrupted, I was lying about expelling someone. The entire class, except a few kids, perked up at that in shock. Midoriya did as well, but not for the same reasons. So did the ghost, but only the teen could see that. That was a rational deception. The pro smiled eerily, meant to bring out the best in all of you. The class of first years all erupted into shouts of chaos, especially Minta. But the quiet boy kept his mouth shut as normal, and instead turned to look at his mentor. I am thoroughly confused. The child couldn't agree more. It was pretty obvious that it was a lie. The girl who placed first, Yaoyorozu, stated, I assumed you all knew that too. The duo shared another puzzled look. They hadn't imagined seeing Aizawa seething mad at the beginning when he made the declaration. It didn't make sense for it to be just a lie. Without even discussing it, both were certain that the teacher was going to expel last place, but changed his mind for some reason. Anyway, we're done here, the hero continued, completely ignoring his class's outburst. Change and head back to the classroom. Your documents about the curriculum should be in there. And with that, the pro walked away and headed inside himself, leaving the students to now rush back to the locker room. Midoriya trailed behind everyone, not wanting to be swept up in the crowd. He made sure to avoid Bakugo as well, unsure if he would want to attack him after the placements. Once he arrived at the locker room, he made haste to his own locker. Opening it up, he quickly grabbed both his bag and uniform, as well as an extra pair of gloves. He hadn't noticed his signature polyester gloves were starting to disintegrate until Gami had pointed it out at the end of the test. The ghost's reasoning was that he had noticed it earlier, but didn't want to worry him during the apprehension tests. Whether Midoriya truly appreciated the lateness of the gesture or not was debatable, but he was just thankful that most of his gloves remained intact. He always packed extra gloves for situations like this, his paranoia getting the best of him. But he wouldn't consider it paranoia if someone called it that, just being precautious. And he was always precautious. Finally snapping out of his thoughts, he walked towards the stall he used earlier. But as he passed by the other boys, Ida spoke up. I must say, Midoriya, he started, I'm very much impressed by your skills. I really misjudged you. Thank you. The teen stumbled out. You were pretty cool too. Your quirk is a speed-boosting one, right? The glasses-wearing boy seemed to straighten up at the praise. Yes, my quirk is engine, and it indeed boosts my speed. He smiled, and took that last statement as a cue to leave. But just as he was going to take another step, someone else called out, I must agree. You are a mad banquet of darkness. He turned around to see a student with what looked to be a bird head. He hadn't recognized him though and was startled overall by his sudden statement. Thank you. He wasn't sure whether that was a compliment. I don't know your name though. I'm Takoyami Fumikage, the bird boy introduced, then gestured to his side, and this is Dark Shadow. Midoriya was about to question the newly introduced Takoyami, when a shadowy bird with red eyes materialized right where he had gestured. He recognized the shadow from some of the events back on those school grounds. That's me. The bird giggled. His scythe is so cool, Takoyami. Can we keep him? Said boy looked done with his shadow counterpart. That's not how it works, Dark Shadow. Though I agree, his scythe is indeed cool. The teen looked down bashfully at the praise. Gami would have been weary, but the man was too busy studying Dark Shadow in the moment. He determined that the bird could not see him and returned to his successor's side. Ida jumped back into the conversation, though, I must ask, what exactly is your quirk, Midoriya? because you displayed some other abilities in the entrance exam that you did not during that quirk apprehension test. The timid boy got a bit nervous at the question, but calmed himself down. He in the spirit had rehearsed this exact scenario multiple times. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone asked about his quirk, student or teacher. He and the ghost both noticed that the other males in the room immediately tuned in once that question was asked. The others were probably curious as well. He knew Bakugo was definitely listening just to scope him out, though a certain candy cane student was also doing the same. Well, he started, my quirk is called Reaper. It's basically got two major parts. When both Tokoyami and Ida didn't say anything, he continued. Dark Shadow cocked his head curiously. I can decay living and non-living things with my hands. That's probably what you noticed in the exam, Ida. Though, it works no matter how many of my fingers are touching, so it's a bit hard to control. I see, the strict student replied. I'm assuming that's why you wear those gloves. Midoriya picked at his long sleeves nervously and Gami narrowed his eyes. Yeah, it acts up when I get emotional. My gloves are kind of like the first layer of defense. Tokoyami noticed the boy's discomfort and tried to change the topic. What about the other part of your quirk? Well, the other part is my scythe, of course. It's like my own personal weapon. I can make it appear and disappear at will. Dark Shadow seemed to get excited. Is it heavy? The teen snorted lightly. Not really, though that could just be because I'm used to it. Ada still looked confused though. But what about the explosion with the zero-pointer? And the ball throw? I can basically combine those two parts together, he explained. I can share my decay with my scythe. That didn't satisfy Ada, but that doesn't explain the explosion. It's honestly just something I figured out. My decay works on a molecular level. So even if my weapon only cuts the air, I can decay those molecules and you're creating a brief, unstable vacuum, and that's where the explosion comes from, he interrupted, becoming excited. I think I understand now. Midoriya looked over at the bird duo and Tokoyami nodded, confirming his understanding as well. Whoa, Dark Shadow exclaimed, that's so cool. Indeed, Eda agreed. You have truly amazed me with your ingenuity, Midoriya, said boy cringed at the name. He didn't really want to go by that during his years here at UA. You can call me by a nickname, if you'd like. I'm not too big a fan of being called Midoriya. He hoped he wasn't being too demanding or abrupt, since neither Ida or Tokoyami said anything after. But Dark Shadow didn't seem to notice the tension, if there was any. Can I call you Midori? The teen smiled at the little bird. That's fine. Then I will call you that as well, if that is all right. Tokoyami followed right after his shadowy friend. He nodded in confirmation. Ida spoke next. I'm afraid I'm not very good with nicknames, but I'll do my best. Thanks, the teen answered, but I'm going to go change now. Both boys nodded and let him go, so he meandered over to the stall and shut the door. Unfolding his school uniform, he carefully took off his gym clothes and slipped it on, removing the black turtleneck as well. That went well. Midoriya huffed. What? The whole quirk thing or just talking to them in general? The man snorted at his successor's awkwardness. Both. Yeah, they seemed pretty nice, and I think the lie came off well. But after that, no more words were spoken. The boy exited the stall into a near-empty locker room. His gym clothes were now neatly folded in his backpack and his school uniform smoothed out. He had already taken a while in the locker room, and pretty much everyone else had left already. He was about to do the same, when a new voice called out to him. Midoriya, correct. He turned around to see a heterochromatic-eyed boy facing him, a scar covering the spot where his right eye was. Yeah, you are. The student didn't even pause. Todoroki shouted. The teen recognized the name from the quirk apprehension chart. This was the boy who placed above him in second. From the first glance, he seemed cold and reserved, a bit similar to how Gami acted when they first met. But now, the room was filled with tense silence, and it unnerved him. Didio, you need something from me. Todoroki didn't respond instantly. Gami grew hesitant and moved closer to the boy. He wasn't sure what this kid was going to pull. Are your parents pro-heroes? Midoriya didn't know what to expect, but he surely wasn't expecting that. What? No. The other student narrowed his eyes, but didn't say anything right away. So he tried to reassure him that this was the truth. My parents aren't heroes. They're just, why did you drive Hisashi away from me? Why did you have to be quirkless? Don't you realize what you have done to me? Normal, you quirkless misfit. Get out of my way. I said get out of my way. People. That did nothing to convince Todoroki though. In fact, he grew more suspicious at the hesitant response. He wanted to press him more, but the teen was growing skittish. We should really get going, he stated abrupt, or we're going to be late. Todoroki didn't want to let this go just yet though. Can we talk after school then? Midoriya was eager to leave the situation, but at the same time, he really didn't want this conversation to continue. But something in his heart wanted to hear his classmate out. He reminded the boy so much of Gami, and he knew how many repressed emotions the ghostly man was hiding. What if he was the same? Maybe talking after school wasn't such a bad idea. Izu, sure, that sounds fine. Midoriya had gone through the rest of his classes with ease, as well as silence, until lunch had arrived. He was so excited to see lunch rush as part of the school staff, and for the first time in years, he ate a meal he didn't have to cook. A warm feeling filled him when he took his first bite, and he knew it wasn't from the hot food alone. The teen found a table to himself, and was prepared to sit alone, as he always had. That's when he could talk to Gami and do his job without any interruptions, or mumble to himself as he scribbled away in one of his notebooks, or analyze a quirk with his mentor. That's what he was used to. That's what he liked. So he was certainly surprised when Ada and the brunette sat themselves down on the other side of the table. "Ah, Ada," he greeted. Infinity Girl. I never caught your name actually." She giggled. "I'm Uraraka Ochako." Ada immediately began with praise. "Both your scores for the ball throw and your placements overall were impressive." Uraraka smiled. "You did just as amazingly." Ada Tenya, right. Correct. But I cannot believe Aizawa-sensei fooled us like that. "Yeah, that was sure stressful," she confirmed. Midoriya hummed in agreement. "He made me think that this is how it's like at the top. But our own instructor deceived us." The two then devolved into idle chatter after that, with the shy boy chiming in every now and again. He had originally assumed that Ida would be an issue after the events of the entrance exam, but he realized the student wasn't like that at all, just a very serious rule follower. And Uraraka was a very nice person overall. She was talkative and cheery, pretty much the complete opposite of himself. He really wasn't used to this kind of treatment, though it really was just typical friendly talk. It made him wonder how much he'd missed out on during his years of elementary and middle school. Uraraka had ended up asking about his quirk as well, so he explained it as similarly as he did in the locker room, with Ida butting in a few times. She was fairly awestruck when he recounted the destruction of the zero-pointer and clarified how he did it. Of course, she ended up being a bit nosy into the gloves, so he had to explain that as well. "So you can decay living things too, right? Is there a limit? Like what about people, or animals, or even plants?" Midoriya swallowed a chunk of food in his mouth. "There isn't a limit. It works on all that." Ada joined in, "So no finger limit or target limit. Your quirk seems strangely unbalanced." Well, that was partially because it wasn't really a quirk, but even then, it had its drawbacks, enough to make him weary of using it. "Well, it's a bit intimidating. Any damage I do to a living thing can't be healed." Both kids paled. "What?" The boy shrunk back. Maybe he shouldn't have said that. "I can control it partially. I can touch people as well as objects without my powers activating, but not plants or animals. I've actually never touched an animal since my abilities developed. I don't want to take the risk." The brunette looked heartbroken. "Oh, I'm so sorry if I brought up unwanted memories." Ada agreed. "I as well." No, it's fine. That's just how I've always been. I'm used to it at this point," he assured them. "That's why I wear gloves. Sometimes my power activates without my consent when I'm emotional. I'd rather not put anyone at risk." There was a bit of silence after that, but the stiff boy spoke up. "Well, I think it is admirable that you're working to become a hero despite however your quirk acts." Uraraka perked up too. "Yeah. Your quirk may be a bit unnerving, but you've put it to good use." Midoriya smiled. "Thank you guys. I've never really heard that before." That was technically the truth. He'd never told anyone about his abilities before, so no one had actually reassured him. Sure, Gami did from time to time, but that was to be expected of the man who introduced said abilities to him. Well, that's what friends are for. That took his breath away. Did she just call him a friend? They had only just met. How could she consider him a friend so suddenly? Was that just how friendship worked? He surely didn't know. His first day was turning out to be more groundbreaking than he expected, but he needed to make sure. He needed to know that she wasn't just pulling his leg, like the other kids did at Aldera. He fumbled. "We're friends." Ada backed up her statement. "Most certainly." "Yeah, of course." But even then, he was still weary. The Spectre noticed his hesitation. The poor boy had lived in his shell his whole life. He wasn't used to being coaxed out of it. They seemed like nice kids. The man wasn't sure if that was enough to reassure his friend. But as he turned to look at him, he picked up on the newfound confidence. "Okay then." The girl brightened up. "Awesome. I'm kind of embarrassed, but I don't think I ever confirmed your name." "Midoriya." "Deku, right?" His mouth grew dry. They were going to make fun of him, weren't they? She noticed his pause. "During the test, that Bakugo guy called you that." Oh, she just genuinely thought that was his name then. My real name is Izuku. Deku is just Bakugo's way of making fun of me." Ada scowled. "Ugh, and that boy is truly aiming to be a hero." Uraraka kept on with her tangent, ignoring Ada. "Well, I think it sounds like Deku. You know, like do your best." "I kinda like it." As nice as he thought the girl was, there was no way in his right mind that he would ever let someone call him Deku again. He wanted that name to die with his old self from Aldera. He was really striving for a fresh start here at UA. "I'm not really comfortable with being called that." The brunette seemed sort of sad at that, so he did his best to save face. "But I wouldn't mind another nickname though. I don't really want to be called Midoriya." And just like he hoped, her eyes sparkled again with newfound purpose. She raised a finger to tap at her chin in contemplation. There were another few moments of silence, where no one spoke a word. What about Midori? It matches your hair pretty well. He snorted at the coincidence. Sure, that's fine. She must have interpreted the huff as something else though. Is Midori not good either? Ada jumped in to help explain. I'm pretty sure he is just amused. Another student from the locker room ended up calling him that as well. That restarted Uraraka's bubbliness. Well, then it must be fate. Midori it is. Everyone at the table laughed, and lunch faded into conversation. There wasn't much time left, so the three ended up having to shovel the rest of their food down to get to class. There were only a couple more hours left before the first day would officially be over, and Midoriya wanted to savor every second. His two friends from before left a bit earlier than he did, though that was only because he told them not to wait for him. He wanted some time to talk with his mentor. So, he began. Midori, huh? The newly nicknamed teen waved him off. Joke all you want, but I actually like it. Well, that is what matters, is it not? He placed his tray down on one of the drop-off tables. Yeah. The two left the cafeteria together in silence. But at seeing the hallway empty, their conversation started up again. I'm guessing this means no more sorting at lunch then. The boy nearly slapped himself. I didn't even think about that. Shoot, I can't just make them stop coming to the table though. No worries, you will just have to pick up the slack throughout the day. Yeah, I can just work extra in the mornings and evenings. The duo made their way back to the 1A classroom with a little pep in their step. He was a bit disappointed that he would no longer have lunch to chat with his ghostly companion, but the change of scenery was pleasant. Besides, he was glad to have Ida and Uraraka around. Despite Midoriya's greatest efforts to make the day last, the rest of the classes simply flew by. Before he knew it, it was already the end of the last class. After the rest of the regular subject classes, his schedule ended at 1A, which Aizawa clarified would be heroics. But they weren't doing any heroics today, since the pro had already had them participate in the Quirk Apprehension test earlier. They were only going over some of the documents handed to them near the beginning of the day, syllabuses and such. Most kids thought it was boring, but the quiet teen didn't really mind. Just the fact that he had gone through the day without anyone hurting him or making fun of him really gave him no room to complain. But eventually, the class, as well as the day, was over. Midoriya sat up out of his chair and swung his bag over one of his shoulders. He paused for a moment, letting a good portion of his classmates exit before him. But that didn't stop Uraraka or Ada from meeting up with him at his desk. Wow, the brunette sighed. I can't believe the first day is over already. Both boys nodded in agreement. Are you two headed to the station? She followed up. Yeah, I am. He responded softly. Indeed, Ada confirmed. Well then, let's get going. The two boys nodded again, and the three made their way to the classroom door. Gami trailed behind, silently observing the classroom. The teacher, Eraserhead, was still at the front of the room, shuffling around some papers. But upon closer inspection, the spirit realized he was sneaking glances at his successor. His eyes narrowed accordingly. Just because his friend admired the hero didn't mean he had to be easy on him. Gami never saw it as overprotecting, just simply watching out for the boy. Besides, it wasn't like he could do much with his transparent form and all. But the ghost desperately wished he could interact with more, because he watched the pro stand up and walk towards the small group of kids. He tensed, but even that wasn't enough to solidify his hands so he could defend if he needed to. Midoriya. All three kids turned around, even though only one had their name called. Aizawa towered over them, his hands stuffed into his pockets. His long, black hair brushed over his tired eyes, but he still managed to look intimidating. The teacher continued when no one responded. I need to speak to you. The teen flashed a worried look to Uraraka, and she shared the same sentiment. Ada stiffened up and straightened out his glasses. The girl was the first to speak, surprisingly. It's okay, Midori, she assured. We'll see you tomorrow. Ah, okay, he mumbled. His two new friends sent him bright smiles and waved as they exited the classroom. Midoriya smiled back, though it wasn't as wide. He turned around to face his teacher, but kept his guard up, not knowing what to expect. Gami's tall figure loomed next to him and made him feel safer. That was one of the nicest aspects about having the specter around pretty much 24/7. He never felt alone, no matter the situation. The spirit already did a lot to reassure him on a daily basis, but his presence alone simply put him at ease. What did you need, Aizawa-sensei? He pondered. It's about the Quirk Apprehension test, he answered, but not here. That made the teen pale. He hoped his teacher wasn't getting suspicious about his quirk. That would definitely not end well. The hero walked to the door and gestured for the boy to follow him. He was growing more nervous by the second, but he did his best to hide it so as to not draw attention. He twiddled his gloved fingers together and stepped through the doorway, but stopped to check the classroom. There were only a few students left in the corners of the room, and Midoriya didn't know any of their names. But his eyes settled on the one student he did know, one red and white-haired boy. He felt bad that he wouldn't be able to hold out on his promise, but there wasn't anything he could really do. Todoroki just stared back without a word, and the tension in the room only strengthened. The shy teen just sent him an awkward smile and a slight wave, before rushing off to catch up to Aizawa. The duo walked slightly behind the teacher as he led them down another hall. The ghost and boy shared a lot of looks between each other, with Gami making comments every here and there. "Do not worry too much. I am sure it will all work out." He didn't answer, of course, so the ghost just kept rambling. "Besides, we rehearsed what to say to most typical questions concerning your quirk." They turned down another hallway. Midoriya was still unsure of where they were going, or what exactly Aizawa needed with him. Whatever it may be, we are most likely overthinking it. He could only focus on the soft echoes of his footsteps behind the hero, and the smooth tone of his mentor's voice. Maybe he is simply curious about. "We're here," the pro unknowingly interrupted. The teen looked out from behind his teacher, but a seemingly normal door was the only thing that greeted him. Though the door looked similar to most of the closets and rooms in the school, something about it seemed so imposing. He clasped his hands nervously and held them close to his chest, his fingers twitching. He couldn't deny the fact that he admired Eraserhead. The man was one of his biggest inspirations growing up, especially after meeting All Might. The way he fought, his nonchalant attitude, his whole stature, made him Midoriya's favorite hero. The hero just put the boy's mind into overdrive. Even his companion admitted that he was interesting, and Gami found few things appealing. But right now, he was feeling less awe and more afraid. The pro was radiating this serious energy, and it just infected the air around them. It felt like something was caught in his throat. Aizawa turned the handle and swung open the door. It creaked on its hinges for a second, but didn't make a sound afterwards. The teacher didn't walk it right away though, just held it open. When the student didn't move, his eyes snapped down and he thrusted out his hand. "Go on in," he clarified. The teen jumped. "Ooh, okay." He did what the hero said, and walked inside. The room looked to be an office, with wide windows covering the back wall. There was simply furnishing, a large wooden desk and a seating area in front of it. Behind the desk was a tall swivel chair facing the windows. The chair was moving, so he could tell that someone was in it. The door was shut behind him, and drew a startled gasp from him. He spun around to see the hero closing the door. The man gestured to take a seat, so Midoriya did. He carefully sat down on one end of the small couch, and Aizawa placed himself on the other end. The boy nudged his form closer to the armrest, hoping to increase the space between them. Gami stood next to his successor by the couch, and rested his hand near the armrest. He tried to lean on it, but his hand slipped right through. Normally, he would have at least snorted at that, but he had enough self-control and common sense to realize that may not be a good idea when in close proximity to a pro hero. Then, the office chair turned around, shocking the teen out of his bewilderment. At first, he saw no one sitting and the possibility of a ghost ran through his head. But then, a small animal hoisted himself off of the seat and onto the desk. The duo observed him silently. They both weren't sure what animal he was, but he wore a black suit with orange sneakers. The shoes were very similar to Midoriya's own, the thick soles matching up and everything. The rodent-looking creature reached the edge of his desk and sat down, letting his feet dangle off. He smiled at the two sitting in front of him before saying his signature greeting. "Am I a dog, a mouse, a bear? Who knows?" the animal declared. "But more importantly, I'm the principal." The boy paled. He was in front of the principal. Aizawa had taken him to the principal. He couldn't shake the feeling out of his gut that this wasn't going to be good. Hello sir," he stuttered out. "You can just refer to me as Nezu, Midoriya," he stated. "Would you care for a cup of tea?" His hands grew clammy. It was just his luck that the principal knew his name. That meant he was probably looking into him. Sure, Nezu-san." The principal hopped off his desk and headed over to a small table by a bookshelf. While there, he opened up what looked to be a thermos and poured its contents into 2 cups. "I'm assuming you don't want any Aizawa-san?" he asked. "No, I'm good. Thanks though." The animal then returned with 2 cups in his hand. He placed one on the coffee table in front of the couch and pushed it towards the teen. He slowly picked it up with both gloved hands, feeling the warmth even through the polyester. He took a small sip and instantly felt at ease. The principal sat down back on the desk, his tail swinging back and forth. "Do you know why you're here, Midoriya?" he began, still holding the cup between his paws. "Just stay calm." "No sir." Nezu then gestured to the other pro. Aizawa coughed to clear his throat. "During the Quirk apprehension test, I asked you to demonstrate the ball throw for everyone, yes?" the tired man questioned. Midoriya resisted the urge to look at Gami for guidance. He kept both hands on the teacup and looked over to his homeroom teacher. "Yeah, you did," he confirmed. There was a short pause before the man continued. "I understand you know of me." The teen brightened at that. "Yeah, you're Eraserhead. If this is about me calling you out in front of everyone, then I just want to apologize and that I totally didn't mean to." The pro held out his hand, and he immediately stopped rambling. "That's not what this is about. You know what my quirk is? Where was the hero going with this? Yeah, it's erasure. You can erase people's quirks when you look at them, unless they're mutant types. Your quirk is classified as an emitter, correct? The man narrowed his eyes. That was what Midoriya listed his quirk as? It seemed like the best fit. Yes. Then do you want to explain why I couldn't erase your quirk during the test? The gasp launched itself in the boy's throat. This was certainly unexpected. He turned to glare at the spirit, but caught himself midway and snapped his head back. What was he supposed to do? There was no way he could have expected to have Eraserhead as his homeroom teacher, so he didn't have an excuse prepared for something like this. Nezu and Aizawa were currently staring him down. He had to say something soon, but his mind was racing and drawing a blank at the same time. His heartbeat flooded his ears as his hands grew sweaty. He couldn't even form a coherent thought like this, much less a believable lie. You could spin it as a misunderstanding. Make them believe your powers are what is it called? A mutant quirk instead. This time, the teen couldn't stop himself from snapping to his mentor. He knew the man was only trying to help, but this wasn't really helping. That's not how it works, he seethed. But unfortunately, his angry whisper wasn't quiet enough to be completely unheard. At least, not to the individual in the room who had sharper senses. Who are you talking to, Midoriya? Nezu inquired with a curious, yet sadistic smile. If Aizawa's declaration didn't make him piss himself, the principal's statement certainly did. Eraserhead turned to look at his student. He definitely wasn't expecting this kind of turnout. His gut was starting to push the idea that this kid could be a spy, and had some sort of communications device on him right now. He reached for his phone, and was ready to call Tsukachi and some other heroes if it came to that. Midoriya's throat grew dry. He was really at a loss for what to do. Gami could see the bind his successor was in. The truth about his powers and subsequently the explanation of being death wasn't some sort of secret that needed to be kept. There were no repercussions from the higher-ups if the current death spilled to someone. It was more of putting oneself at risk. After all, outing a fact like that could lead his friend to be targeted or experimented on, or even locked away. The Spectre wished he had this conversation with the boy before this. Your position isn't something that is required to be kept secret. He tried to explain quickly, cursing out his luck. You will not get punished if you spill. However, you will be putting yourself at risk. Well, at this point, the teen could see really no other way out of this situation. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. He finally responded to the principal. Aizawa tensed. The rodent smirked even wider. Try me. The boy swallowed thickly. Here goes nothing. Well, there's a ghost next to me. He could see the looks of disbelief on the teachers' faces. There was no stopping now. He's a bit over 5 centuries old, and he's basically my mentor. I don't know his real name though, so I just call him Gami. His homeroom teacher still looked skeptical, but Nezu just seemed interested. All right then. Assuming what you are saying is the truth, what does Gami have to do with your quirk? And here was the waterfall. He held his breath, preparing to go over. I don't actually have a quirk. Gami passed his powers down to me. That was the simplest way of saying it. After quite a while in the principal's office, Midoriya was able to explain everything. And by everything, I mean everything. How he was the current death, and Gami was the previous. How he handled his position and what exactly that entailed. How his powers didn't stem from a quirk factor and the mass amount of other abilities he actually had. And how the ghost had been with him since he was little, helping him through his first 11 years. The teen wasn't sure how the teachers had remained so level-headed during the whole time. He was sure his story and claims sounded outlandish. If he was hearing them for the first time, he wasn't sure that he himself would believe them. But Nezu and Aizawa simply let him talk without any interruptions. After he was done explaining, the principal wanted to see his abilities for himself. So the boy disintegrated a few sheets of paper all while Eraserhead used his quirk on him. And just like the quirk apprehension test, he was unaffected. So Gamison is basically the Grim Reaper? Nezu questioned. Said Spirit growled. I am not whatever you consider the Grim Reaper. He's not too happy at being called that, Midoriya referred, but basically. Excuse me, I just said I was not. The rodent continued, but he retired from his duties after a few centuries. Indeed, the teen confirmed. And because he is no longer active, his position is now yours. Yes, Nezu hummed. Well, I see no reason to not believe you. At that, the teen's eyes popped out of his skull. Wait, really? You believe me? As unbelievable as your story may seem, there really is no reason for you to have such a bizarre explanation unless it were true. The student let out a huge sigh of relief. Oh, thank God. The principal continued. As for your quirk records, it is best to leave them as is for your safety. If you truly do have immortality, then keeping that a secret from villains is ideal. Though, I do want to keep a separate record of your abilities. That's understandable, he nodded. However, I won't keep you any longer today. Your first day has likely been hectic enough. I'll be having you back in my office for further evaluations, though. Midoriya was shocked at what he was implying. Wait, so you're not kicking me out of UA? Nezu chuckled. Why would I do that? I mean, because of the whole lying on my Quirk records thing. Nonsense, he exclaimed. Besides, your situation is most intriguing. I'd prefer to keep tabs on you here at UA. Gami gave the rodent a suspicious look. He wasn't going to let this individual do anything invasive or dangerous to his successor. He wanted to make sure both teachers remembered that he was here, watching them. He was still a force to be reckoned with. Goddamn, if they even laid a hand on him, he would make sure they felt his fury. In the spirit's protective rage, he impulsively swiped at the principal. His hand was off by a few inches though, and plowed towards the teacup he had set down on the table. He wasn't expecting to interact with anything, but the universe had other plans. Midoriya watched in horror as Gami knocked over Nezu's teacup. The cup clattered on the table and the leftover tea spilled over the side. Gami, what's gotten into you? He cried. Oh, Nezu-san, I'm so sorry. It's quite all right, he replied, but looked over to the spot by the couch in curiosity. The teen also looked there with a disapproving stare. I do not want my presence to be forgotten. If they do anything to you, I will do all that I can to fight back, the ghost clarified. So he repeated what his mentor said, sorry again. Gami doesn't want you all to forget that he's here. He's a bit protective of me. A bit was an understatement. But the principal took no offense. Oh well, Gami-san, I can assure you I will not harm Midoriya, nor intentionally put him in harm's way. The specter seemed satisfied at that and the tension in the room died down. Nezu dismissed them and moved to clean up his spilled tea. Aizawa held open the door again for the student. And the two, plus the ghost, walked back down the hallway. Not a word was spoken, but the silence ate away at the boy's conscience. Do you believe me? He mumbled. Aizawa-sensei. The teacher looked down. Well, if Nezu does, then I don't really have a reason not to. Even if your story seems a bit too outlandish to be rational. Oh, they continued to walk, with more silence creeping up behind them. He hoped he hadn't made the pro upset in any way. Aizawa never thought he was good with kids. But after years of living with Hisashi, he got good at picking up emotions. Look, problem child, he started. I'm not mad or anything, if that's what you think. Ooh, they turned down a hall, and Midoriya could see the 1A classroom. He fiddled with his gloved fingers nervously. Despite finishing his tea, he could feel his throat dry up again. Aizawa-sensei, the teen began. The hero looked over to him again, but didn't say anything. He just took it as a motion to continue. I'm not sure how much you caught back in the office, but my decay is permanent when used on a living organism. The tired teacher raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I heard that. The timid boy kept on. Well, I'm a bit afraid of it. Aizawa immediately caught on to what he was trying to say. The kid was training at a hero school, so eventually he'd have to fight villains. Having such a dangerous power like that would make anyone second-guess using it on a person, even if it is in self-defense. Problem child, if I see you hesitating, I'll let you know whether or not to use it. Call it permission if you will. Midoriya smiled. I'd appreciate that. They eventually stopped at the classroom door and parted ways. Eraserhead went back inside to finish up his paperwork, and the student left for the exit. He had spent nearly 2 hours in Nezu's office. If his mother cared about him, she'd be frantic to know why he was so late. But he knew she really didn't, so the time difference was of no worry to him. Well, that went surprisingly well. I know, he agreed and pushed open the front doors. The duo walked together down the beautiful path, trying to collect themselves. Today had definitely been a crazy day. Between finding out that Bakugo was in his class, to the Quirk apprehension test, to the possibility of making real friends, and now outing his biggest secret to Eraserhead and Nezu. The teen was looking forward to just going home and doing nothing. Maybe he'd take a long shower and lounge out on the couch. That sounded nice right about now. But right as he exited the front gates of the school, all thoughts of relaxation were blown from his head. GHH, he cried out in shock. The object that had startled him wasn't even an object at all. It was a familiar candy cane-headed boy leaning against the gate. At the cry, Todoroki stood up straight again and walked over to Midoriya. Todoroki, I wasn't expecting to see you. He stuttered. We did agree to talk after school, the student replied bluntly. Yeah, but it's been nearly 2 hours. The green-haired boy was a little freaked out at his dedication, but the other kid simply shrugged nonchalantly. Gami wasn't sure what to make of the situation, but after all that had happened today, he was ready to defend any way he could. When Todoroki didn't start the conversation, Midoriya tried to. The awkward silence was really making him uncomfortable. SSO, what did you want to talk about? My father is the hero Endeavor. I'm sure you must have heard of him. Well, that was certainly one way to start a conversation. Though, that did explain why his family name felt so familiar. Yeah, the teen responded carefully. He's the number 2 hero. Todoroki huffed in confirmation. My old man is ambitious. He aims for the top. He could see where the teen in front of him was coming from. Endeavor had always been a bit rash and hasty in his hero work after all. That must have been due to his ambitious nature. But he didn't bother to interrupt and let him keep talking. He used his power in order to make a name for himself as a hero, but he was never able to best All Might. The symbol of peace is living proof of his failure. Midoriya stiffened at the wording. Todoroki was being oddly harsh towards his father. Sure, he didn't really fancy the number 2 hero either, but still, this seemed kind of rough coming from his own son. He's still at it though, trying to take down All Might, one way or another. I'm not really sure what you're getting at. He was desperate for some clarification, and he could tell his mentor was thoroughly confused as well. What are you trying to tell me, Todoroki? Have you ever heard of quirk marriages? What? The ghost growled. He hadn't heard of them, but based on the spirit's reaction, he could tell they were nothing good. They became a problem in the first few generations after superpowers became widespread. There were those who sought out potential mates solely with the intention of creating powerful children. The stoic student paused. Many people were forced into relationships. They were simply viewed as old-fashioned arranged marriages, but clearly it was unethical. Do not tell me. My father had not only a rich history of accomplishments, but plenty of money to throw at his problems. Midoriya could see where this was going, but he hoped desperately for his thoughts to be wrong. He bought my mother's relatives to get his hands on her quirk, and now he's raising me to usurp All Might. The shy teen couldn't hold back the pain gasp that escaped his throat. How despicable. The majority of humans today have no respect for one another. But Todoroki either didn't notice or didn't care. In every memory of my mother, I only see her cry. Midoriya brought his hands to his mouth, but couldn't stop the stray tears from falling. It hurt to hear his classmate recount such a horrible childhood. His heart panged as he recalled his own nightmares from when he was younger. I remember she called my left side unbearable. He continued, despite the reaction from the boy he was speaking to, before she poured boiling water on my face. He caught the sob that he nearly released after hearing that. His thoughts now centered on his own burn scar that laid across his chest. Todoroki was still just a child. He himself was still just a child. What had any of them done to deserve such a fate? Even though my mother was the one who gave me this scar, he gestured to his right eye. I only blame my scumbag of a father for pushing her to this. Why? He stumbled. Why are you telling me all this? The candy cane boy took a step closer. I saw the same pain in your eyes from the moment you walked into the classroom. You've gone through the same as I have. The currently distraught teen looked up shakily. What? I thought that your parents might have been pro-heroes, but I don't think that anymore. But that doesn't dismiss the fact I still believe you are different from everyone else. Different? He knew Todoroki was probably referring to his home life or something, but what should he even say? His classmate had just spilled his whole tragic backstory to him, and yet he was hesitant to do the same. You do not have to say anything. Kami could probably see his dilemma, but still, the advice didn't feel right to take. The two boys waited in silence, but the minute he looked back up into Todoroki's eyes, guilt flooded his conscience. My father was always distant. His mouth had started for him. He worked abroad and was never usually home, so it was only my mother and I when I got my quirk diagnosed. He watched as the red and white-haired boy listened intently. He didn't want to lie, but he also couldn't spill everything, so he treaded lightly around the truth. I was an outlier compared to my parents. That wasn't technically a lie after all. His quirklessness didn't run in the family. My mother was quiet about it at first, but when my father found out, he wasn't happy. Kami was impressed that his successor was managing to recount this horrific event so calmly. His friend had told no one about his situation at home, and yet this boy had coaxed it out of him. The days after my diagnosis, my parents constantly fought. My father didn't want me anymore, and my mother was at a loss for what to do. Midoriya tugged at his uniform collar, revealing the bit of his scar that peeked out. He heard Todoroki take a sharp inhale. On the third day after, my parents got into a really bad fight and he hit her. I tried to help her and calm him down, but my father was too furious. He has a fire-breathing quirk. That definitely made Todoroki gasp, though it was small and light. He burned me that night, all across my chest and right shoulder. The teen motioned to his chest where the scar laid. He never came back after that night either. The other boy tried to respond. My mother, he didn't mean to interrupt, but if he stopped now, he was afraid he wouldn't start again. She blames me for his departure. She resorted to alcohol to try and cope, but things only got worse. I don't have anywhere else to go though, so I just try and stay out of her way. He took a slow breath once he finished, and Todoroki's cold gaze softened. I'm sorry, he began, that you went through that. I'm sorry for you too. I had no idea Endeavor was so cruel. Most people don't. He's got enough money to cover anything up anyway, so it's not like I could say anything. They stayed quiet for a while. Midoriya picked at his gloves while Todoroki shuffled his hands in his pockets. Kami moved his arms to wrap around the small boy, hoping to comfort him. He had no idea what was going to come of this conversation. But he didn't want to see someone so similar to him struggle on his own, like he was. So he took a risk that he hoped wouldn't backfire on him. I'm still not too sure what you were trying to accomplish with this conversation. But do you want to be friends? We can work through this together. Todoroki's eyes narrowed. I didn't come here to make friends. He paled. Ooh. The timid boy's reaction immediately made him feel guilty for some odd, unfamiliar reason. So he tried to save face. But I wouldn't mind making an exception, Midoriya. When said child flinched, he realized his mistake. Sorry, I forgot what you said about the name in the locker room. Though now I can understand why. It's fine. You can call me by a nickname. The candy cane teen shuffled. I'm not very good with coming up with nicknames. Midoriya hummed. Well, some people are calling me Midori. But if that's not your style, you can use my given. I'm afraid I don't know it. It's Izuku. Todoroki nodded. Then I'll use that. If you could extend the same courtesy to me, I'd rather not go under that scumbag's name. Do you have a preference? He asked, ignoring the quip. You can use my given as well, the student clarified. He already knew what the green-haired teen was going to ask. It's Shadow. He flashed the stoic kid a wide smile and gripped his backpack straps. Gami proudly stood behind his successor, excited he was taking the initiative to make a friend. So, friends, Shadow, friends, Izuku. Midoriya didn't get very much sleep that night, his mind still locked onto what Todoroki had shared with him. He felt somewhat guilty for trying to end the conversation earlier in the locker room, but also thankful the other student had been so persistent. Gami had told him not to think about it for too long, and to try and get some rest. After all, it was merely the end of the first day. Tomorrow would surely be the start of new chaos. The next day, he woke up early as he normally did, surrounded by a beautiful array of flowers and plants. He would have never guessed that taking care of the spider lilies his middle school classmates left for him would have led to a green thumb. But it did, and gardening soon became a new, relaxing hobby for the boy. Of course, it was a delicate challenge. He had to garden with his gloves on, since the plants would wilt otherwise, and he scraped together the extra cash to upgrade from used mason jars and water to small flower pots and soil. He'd also strayed away from his roots, no pun intended. The teen had started out with taking care of the lilies he had received, but now he didn't grow as many flowers. Most types simply grew too tall for him to manage with gloves. He ended up taking a gamble on some dying succulents one store was giving away, but after a few days of intense care, they thrived and bloomed. The way those little plants grew was so rapid, he had needed to bring out the old mason jars just to give them more space. Succulents ended up becoming his favorite plant to garden, since they spread so quickly and were so resilient. His shelves were covered in them. Midoriya found it ironic for an individual like himself to be surrounded by so much life. He watched as Gami drew open the curtains, letting the morning sun peek through and shower him. The spirit had gotten much better at accurately interacting with his curtains, so that was definitely a plus. It was kind of like his everyday chore he liked to help out with. Opening up his bedroom door, Midoriya made his way into the kitchen. He was fully dressed and held his backpack by the straps. He scoured the cabinet for something to bring along with him for the subway ride, eyes landing on an old granola bar. He could feel his stomach shudder, but it would have to do until he could go grocery shopping again. The duo left the house and strolled down to the subway station. They were a few minutes early, so the boy plopped himself down onto one of the waiting benches. What do you think you will do in heroics today? The man asked, hoping to start some sort of conversation to kill the silence. He shrugged subtly, but when most of the subway goers cleared out of the area, he replied, I'm not sure. Hopefully nothing too stressful like yesterday. He was actually hoping for some bookwork in class. Maybe they'd study hero and villain philosophy, or go over basic quirk laws and regulations. Yesterday caused him to sweat so much, he might as well have Bakugo's quirk. He felt his throat go dry. Maybe that old granola bar wasn't the best thing to have eaten so early in the morning. His hands grew shaky and he started to feel sick. But as his head began to spin, he started to think this wasn't because of the granola bar. Clutching his head, he groaned in discomfort. The ghost flew into action and gave the teen an anchor. A familiar buzzing flooded his ears as he was thrown into a swirling mess of colors and shapes, as many as he had and would have in the future. Midoriya would never get used to the feeling of being sucked into a premonition. The subway station quickly changed into what the boy assumed to be an office building of some sort. He took in his surroundings. Currently, the room he was in had concrete pillars that stretched to the ceilings and evenly tiled flooring. He could make out large windows on every wall. The room was surprisingly empty, without any desks or anything, which made him second-guess his initial assumption of this being an office building. The most obvious thing he could see, though, was a large hole in the floor. It looked to be a wide channel that stretched from left to right, and it had to be over 15 feet wide. He couldn't walk over to it, as these visions normally had him stand in one spot, but he guessed it led to the floor below. Then, he heard footsteps behind him. The boy turned to look away from the doorway. He could make out two figures walking towards him, or at least, towards the exit door. And as they got closer, he paled at who they turned out to be. He watched Ada and Uraraka stop a few feet away from the canyon in the floor, idly chatting about something he couldn't make out. They were wearing odd clothing, Ida in something similar to a suit of armor, and Uraraka decked out in pink, space-like gear. He swung his head around in a panicked manner, searching to catch what would happen to them. A loud explosion rocked his world. He couldn't see where it came from, but the blast shot past him, tossing his hair all about. Hearing the brunette cry out, he lurched over in that direction. He could barely make out their forms, but watched in horror as they were thrown from their feet and over the edge of the gap, likely to their demise a floor below. The crippling feeling of his spine shattering only confirmed that for the teen. The agonizing taste of death finally released him from the vision. The scene returned to being just a subway station, and he focused on his companion squeezing his hands. He couldn't tell if the man was saying something, his ears still ringing from the blast. It felt as if someone had knocked him right in the head, and the phantom pains in his spine throbbed. "Dezu, if you can hear me." He could finally make out what the specter was saying. "Tell me 3 things you can see." Midoriya looked around hazily. He could make out another blue bench a few steps away, as well as a directory behind it. There's a bench over there. It's blue. A subway map is behind it. He groggily searched for something else, and a passing train. "Oh, thank God," Gami replied. 2 things you can feel." The student flexed his fingers damnately, still reasonably dazed. "The metal bench. It's rusty. It was difficult to really feel things with gloves on though. On my uniform pants. And 1 thing you can hear. Just the passing trains. They're really loud today." The teen felt himself calm down as the man in front of him sighed in relief. "Are you back?" He smiled tiredly. "Yeah, I'm right here. You were mumbling a lot this time. I just got worried." "Do you want to tell me what happened?" He gulped heavily. "I saw Uraraka and Ida." He didn't get any reaction from Gami, from lunch. "Yes, I remember. I have not forgotten yet," he said with a snarky undertone. Midoriya ignored it. "I don't know where they were, but there was a big explosion and they fell." His fingers snaked behind his neck and ghosted over the start of his spine. The ghost got the idea. The boy quivered. It hurt so much this time. His voice was quiet, like a scared child. The man threaded a few fingers into his successor's hair. "I can only imagine. But you can help them." These pep talks never got any easier. Gami wished he could take some parental classes for the undead or something. The teen nodded shakily, unsure of himself. "I can help them." "Exactly," he reassured. "Now how about we board the subway before it leaves without us?" He got up unsteadily, but with his mentor's assistance, he managed to stand on his feet. With slow steps, he made his way into the train and threw his shaky body into another seat. Dropping his bag on the seat next to him, he picked at his gloves and stared as the train doors closed. With a sudden lurch, the subway started moving, its creaky wheels unable to drown out his overwhelming thoughts. Why couldn't he have a normal morning today? So far, the day had been reasonably uneventful. Gami and Midoriya didn't talk as much as they did in the past, but managed to sneak some short comments back and forth. They were currently in English class with present Mike, and the teacher was trying to stir up some spirit in the students. "So listeners," he exclaimed, "which one of the following English sentences is incorrect?" No one in the class bothered to answer. The teen looked around at his classmates. They all just stared blankly towards the front of the room, seemingly bored. "All right, everybody. Hands up. Show me some spirit." Midoriya knew the answer to the question. He was fairly decent in his English studies, but that didn't mean he wanted to volunteer to respond. He was sure there were other students who knew as well, so someone would answer eventually. "So, do you plan on telling Aizawa and Nezu about your foresight this morning? They are students here after all." "Yeah, I will," he whispered lightly. "I'm going to do it after heroics. That's the best time anyway." "How about you, Midoriya?" The pro called out. "Do you know the answer?" Said boy paled in shock. Of course the teacher had decided to call on him. It was plausible the man heard him mumbling, but that still didn't make him all right with being singled out. "Take a deep breath," his mentor directed. "You know the answer." So he did. Collecting himself with a breath, he managed to get his nerves under control. "It's number 4. Present Mike pressed on. "Can you explain why?" He nearly growled. He knew that the hero was only doing his job, but did he really have to make him explain? The R relative conjunction is in the wrong place. "That's correct," the man announced like he was on a game show. "Now for the next." The lunch bell suddenly rang, and all of the students quickly rushed out. Midoriya sighed gratefully and collected his things. He was ready for a break, and lunch would be exactly that. The boy piled up his books into his bag just as Uraraka and Ida approached him. "Hey, Midori, ready for lunch?" she asked cheerfully. "Oh, Uraraka," his mind betrayed him and returned to that horrific scene this morning. "Yeah, I'm pretty hungry." The 3 kids left the classroom in a hurry and joined the lunch line. As inexpensive as the school's food was, the teen wasn't sure if he'd be able to eat it for each day. His pockets were already running thin and he needed to shop for food at home. He wasn't actually planning on eating today, but since the 2 students practically dragged him onto the line, he figured he'd indulge himself. He bought himself a hot plate of white rice and steamed vegetables and sat down with his friends. "So heroics is our last class of the day," the brunette stated. "What do you guys think we'll do?" "I don't know," Ada replied. "I assumed it wouldn't be anything strenuous at first. But with Aizawa-sensei as our homeroom teacher, I am no longer so sure of myself." Midoriya hummed in agreement, his mouth full of savory food. "What about you, Midori? What do you think?" At first, he had hoped for some simple bookwork. But after his vision, he desperately hoped for nothing that would put them in danger. "I just hope it's nothing too crazy." Uraraka agreed with him. "Yeah, hopefully no threats of expulsion like yesterday." The three then continued to chat calmly, and made sure to balance out their time with eating as well. The time flew by and they eventually cleaned up their table. The quiet boy searched for signs of his other new friend, but Todoroki was nowhere to be found. That had left him slightly disappointed, but he didn't let it show. The three of them left the lunchroom and walked back together to their classroom. Midoriya sat down at his desk towards the back of the classroom and smiled at Uraraka and Ida, who did the same. Eventually, the rest of the students filed in and soon enough, everyone was waiting on a teacher to arrive. "Last chance to change your guess," Gami teased. "I still think it is going to be a lesson on damage protocol after a villain attack." He scoffed quietly, "Whatever you saw." But the boy didn't get to finish as the classroom door swung open. In walked a person both had forgotten was working at UA. "IAM." The two both flinched at the voice, though only one was truly visible, coming through the door like a normal person. The last time Midoriya had seen All Might was during the holographic projection that had told him of his acceptance to UA. He had been shocked that the hero was going to be teaching at the school, but forgot about it in the months between. And while he couldn't bring himself to hate the number one hero, his presence definitely made him uncomfortable. He fiddled with his gloves nervously as he felt the spirit move closer to him protectively. The teen tried not to show his discomfort as the class gasped in awe. "It's All Might. Incredible. He's really gonna teach us. That's his Silver Age costume. Look at him go." Midoriya stayed quiet, but across the classroom, one red and white-haired teen noticed him shuffle in his seat. His heterochromatic eyes flickered from his new friend to the number one hero in the room. "Hero basic training." The pro started loudly. "The class that'll put you through all sorts of special training to mold you into heroes." The duo grew worried. The odds of having a calm, last class of the day was growing slimmer by the minute. "No time to dally. Today's activity is this." He held up a card with bold lettering on it, "Battle Training." And there went any chance at a nice afternoon. He had been unfortunately placed right behind Bakugo in the seating chart, but watched the blonde grow more and more eerily excited at that prospect. That unnerved him, but he took a breath and just continued listening. "And for that, you'll need these." Suddenly, the classroom walls shifted and extended. Massive shelving units broke from the wall, each containing a number from 1 to 20. Midoriya realized they likely corresponded with each student in the class, in accordance with the Quirk registry and the special request forms you filled out before being admitted. The class understood where All Might was going with this. "Costumes. Yeah, this is awesome. Oh, I'm so excited." The seasoned hero couldn't get the students to quiet down, so he simply yelled over them, "After you change, come out in ranking order to ground beta." Everyone responded back in loud agreements before rushing over to grab their briefcase with their costume in it. Gami watched as his successor waited for the pileup to die down before walking over to grab his own. Together, they made their way to the locker room in order to change. "Do not be too worried about anything. I am sure all will turn out well." The boy huffed indifferently. "That's what you said yesterday," and looked at what happened. The ghost rolled his eyes, but the child couldn't tell. Midoriya changed in the stall as he did yesterday and rushed out to the grounds as the hero stated. He was fully dressed in his hero costume that he and Gami had spent numerous hours designing. Together they came up with a costume that the teen really felt comfortable with. Midori. He heard Uraraka cry out, "Cool costume. Really practical looking." He flushed and grew embarrassed. His costume design was something he was proud of, but hearing it from someone else really made him feel good. The body of his costume was a black jumpsuit, similar to a racer hat, but a bit more skin-tight and reached all the way to his wrists and ankles. He wore a short, brown cape that wrapped around and clipped together in the front. The cape only reached his elbows, but that was purposely designed so it was harder to be grabbed by a villain. He also had a pair of brown combat boots, which had thick, iron soles. The boy wanted his costume to resemble more of a Reaper style, since that was what his quirk was named, but realized a look like that would be inconvenient for fighting and would probably scare civilians off. So the duo quickly modified their designs to fit more of a steampunk look, with solid combinations of brown and black. His costume had a few changes unlike his original design. The support team who designed it added iron heels and tips to his boots, which he was grateful for, as well as metal knee pads. But they also took his steampunk theme a bit farther than the duo had planned, and added numerous leather straps and belt buckles to the jumpsuit, and a pair of geared clocks to the sides of his shoes, and while the extra parts didn't interfere with the costume's practicality, he wasn't quite sure how to feel about them. But all in all, wearing the suit felt just like his own skin. Combined with his usual gloves, Midoriya was ready to take on whatever All Might had planned. He turned around to face Uraraka and nearly fainted in shock. Her suit was the same gear he saw her in during his premonition that morning. It was the same pink space gear he remembered, but he calmed himself down enough to respond. "Gee, thanks, Uraraka. Yours is neat too." She smiled warmly. "I wish I'd been more specific on my request form though. The suit's really skin tight." He tried to get his brain back into analysis mode. Anything to get away from the pressing thoughts of his vision. "Well, your quirk makes you nauseous, right?" "Oh, yeah," she confirmed, remembering the entrance exam where she threw up right in front of him. "Then it's probably to cradle your pressure points," he continued at her confused look. "You know, to make you less nauseous." The brunette laughed. "Oh, well, I guess that makes more sense." Midoriya looked around in search of Ida, but couldn't really pick him out of the crowd. Though, after a second look, he spotted a familiar suit of white armor and nearly threw up. Gami watched his successor grow distraught and added in his 2 cents. "Izu," he began, "just keep an eye on them. Remember that just because the pieces are lining up now, does not mean the puzzle will be completed today." He grimly nodded and tugged at his costume pants. He just needed to look out for them. There was no way he'd let anything happen to his friends on his watch. Looking to take his mind off of Uraraka and Ida's possible demise, he spotted a familiar head of candy cane hair. Well, it was more like just white hair, as half of Todoroki's body was covered in ice. He rushed over to talk. "Hey," to the boy corrected himself quietly. "Shouto." "Hello, Izuku." The stoic student replied back. "Your costume looks good." He grew bashful. "Aw, thanks. I actually came over to ask about yours." "Oh," Todoroki pondered. "I'm not sure you ever explained your quirk to me," Midoriya rambled. "But what's with all the ice?" The boy shifted and grew more serious. "My quirk is half cold, half hot. It lets me generate ice from my right side and fire from my left. But your whole left side is frozen over. I refuse to use my bastard of a father's quirk," he stated bluntly. "I'll become a hero without it." But Shouto, the reserve teen, never got to finish as All Might called out. "It's time for battle training." Most of the students cheered, with the exception being himself since he was still in shock, Todoroki, Bakugo, and a few others. Ida then stepped up towards the front of the crowd, making Midoriya realize how far back he was. "Sensei, this appears to be the same field used in the entrance exam. Will we once again be performing cityscape maneuvers?" All Might shook his head. "No, you will be moving on to step 2, indoor anti-personnel battle training." The hero grew more animated as he spoke. "Villain battles are most commonly seen outdoors, but statistically, the most heinous villains are more likely to appear indoors." He raised a hand to his mouth in contemplation. The teen and his companion studied him closely. The pro was making strange pauses in his statements, almost like he was unsure of what to say. Between confinement, house arrest, and black market deals. In this hero society of ours, All Might took a break to cough. The cleverest villains out there lurk indoors. Well, he couldn't disagree with that, at the very least. His mind went back to the sludge villain incident. While the villain was indeed strong, he wasn't too bright. If attacking Bakugo in the middle of a shopping district was saying something, he'll now be split into villain teams and hero teams, and face off in 2-2 indoor battles. The frog girl Midoriya recognized from the quirk test spoke up. "So no basic training." The pro seemed to grow defensive. "Practical experience teaches you the basics. The distinction here is that you won't be fighting disposable robots." At that, the class devolved into wild comments. "What determines victory?" probed a spiky black-haired girl who he recognized to be Yaoyorozu from the quirk test as well. "Can I just blast everyone away?" Bakugo growled. "Are you threatening to expel someone like Aizawa-sensei did?" Uraraka timidly asked. "How do we proceed to divide ourselves into teams?" Ida questioned stiffly. "How fabulous is my cape?" shined one blonde boy he didn't know the name of. All Might became even more frustrated. "One at a time. My quirk isn't super hearing." He quickly composed himself and opened up a tiny pamphlet from his back pocket. Both Midoriya and Gami deadpanned. The hero was reading from a guide that explained his choppy behavior. "Listen closely. The villains will be hiding a nuclear weapon in the hideout, and the heroes have to go in and take care of it." The seasoned hero flipped a page. "The heroes have a limited amount of time to either capture the villains or secure the weapon. The villains must either capture the heroes or protect the weapon until the time is up." All Might reached for a small box labeled lots and displayed it to the students. "Your battle partners will be decided by drawing lots." Ada immediately countered. "Is that really the best way?" Midoriya pondered the thought. "Well, it makes sense. Pros often have to team up with heroes from other agencies on the spot during emergencies." The teen shuddered and looked up, only to find all the eyes of his classmates on him. He must have said that aloud by accident. Ada heard the comment as well and straightened up. I see. I apologize for getting ahead of myself. My mistake. The number 1 hero stiffened up at the sight of the boy, immediately recognizing him from the sludge villain incident. He had gotten to see his performance during the entrance exam and was surprised at his display of a quirk. It made him wonder why the boy had even asked him that question underneath the overpass. But he pushed the thought from his mind and continued with his spiel. It's fine. Let's just get to it. As All Might drew student numbers from the box, Midoriya was afraid the universe would screw with him and pair him up with Bakugo, but he was graced with Uraraka instead, to which he was thoroughly thankful for. He listened as Todoroki was paired with another student who had multiple sets of arms. Ada was the unfortunate one paired with Bakugo, and the boy pitied him. Nice Midori. Must be fate. His partner cheered, let's do this. He simply smiled back at her and flashed a thumbs up. The hero assigned each team a letter and shuffled them around, moving on. First up are these. He pulled 2 letters out and showed them off. The heroes are Team A. Midoriya and Uraraka looked at each other. They were up first, but who were they going up against? And the villains are Team D. He saw Ada and Bakugo move, and he just knew. Of course the universe decided not to spare him. He was a fool to think it would have mercy on him. All Might didn't notice the hostility he had just created. The villain team goes in first. They have 5 minutes to prepare before the hero team is allowed in. The rest of us will watch via CCTV. He turned to face Ada and Bakugo. You two need to adopt a villain mindset. This is practical experience, so go all out. Don't hold back. That was bad advice to give to a volatile teenager with a dangerous explosion quirk, though I will stop you if you take things too far. It was too late for the hero to save face now. The 2 teams separated. The villains entered the building to prepare, while the heroes remained outside to discuss their plans. Ada and Bakugo made their way to the top floor, where they deposited the weapon. The strict boy rapped his knuckles on its side, deeming it paper mash at the noise. He was a bit disappointed at having to play the role of the villains, but didn't let his mood sour his performance. The blonde wasn't as composed as his partner though. He had been angry when he found out that Deku had gotten into UA, but upon seeing the boy display a quirk the other day, he felt his rage peak over and spill. So Deku has a quirk now. Ada caught the comment as well as the teen's attitude. You saw his technique with his weapon? No. He is definitely the bigger threat, though I ask you not to charge right at Midoriya. But Bakugo ignored his partner's request. Deku had been fooling him this whole time, and there was no way he'd let the damn nerd get off like that. Uraraka pulled out the building blueprints that their teacher had given them, the building's blueprints. Better memorize these. Midoriya nodded. He studied the map of the building and came to the scary conclusion that it looked similar to the one he was in during the foresight. His hands started to shake nervously and his partner picked up on that. Are you all right, Midori? You look really worried. Ah, no, it's nothing. He tried to reassure her, but she didn't look convinced. Is it because we're up against Bakugo? Sorta. He didn't technically lie. He was feeling worried about fighting him, so he played it off like that to ease Uraraka's concerns. Well, don't stress too much about it, she replied. We just need to come up with a plan. Gami, who had remained quiet for some time, pitched into the pep talk. Focus on the task at hand. Come up with a plan that keeps both of them safe. Midoriya nodded his head confidently at his mentor's words. He turned to look at the brunette. Well, if a plan is what we need, then I got one. The hero team listened as All Might called in on their intercoms, telling them to start. Midoriya flew into action without hesitation. Gami, he whispered so Uraraka wouldn't hear, find the weapon. Of course, I will report to you once I discover it. The teen watched his ghostly companion float into the building, then turned to his partner. You ready? She nodded. Let's do this. He squatted slightly and motioned for Uraraka to hop on. They had decided that it would be best to enter from one of the higher floors to keep their element of surprise, but having the brunette float both of them up would take a serious toll on her condition. So Midoriya proposed a different solution. Uraraka wrapped her legs around his waist and hung her arms around his neck. Once he felt stable enough to move, the boy made his way to the exterior wall of the building. He placed both hands on the concrete and began to decay it slowly, having removed his gloves once his partner was secure on his back. Once he felt the notches were large enough for his grip, he stopped and prepared to scale the building the same way he had with the zero-pointer. Midori, she started. Are you sure you don't want me to make myself weightless at least? But he just shook his head. That'll just make you nauseous. Don't worry, I got this. Uraraka didn't want to make her friend doubt himself, so she huffed in agreement. Midoriya hoisted himself up using his first 2 holes, and then gradually made more where he needed them. Sure, the time he scaled the zero-pointer was much easier considering he didn't have another person on him. But even now, they were making their way up the building at a steady pace. The rest of the class observing in the monitor room were having a field day. Wow, look at him go. Is he scaling the building? That's crazy. Todoroki watched quietly, but that didn't mean he wasn't impressed. Scaling a building, especially while carrying someone, was no mere feat. Something like that required great physical strength as well as quirk creativity. It was an ingenious move. Midoriya would definitely be a big contender while he was here at UA. The hero team was currently at the 4th floor when Gami returned. The weapon is being guarded on the 5th floor with Ida. There are no signs of Bakugo anywhere in the building. He hummed, change of plans then. Uraraka heard him. What is it, Midori? Well, the floor above us is the top floor. He tried to explain without mentioning that his ghostly mentor had found the weapon, so that's probably where the weapon is. Ada would probably think that we would float up to the top. She didn't get his point though. If Ada thought we'd start at the top first, why would he put the weapon there? The boy used his head to gesture up at the windows. The 5th floor is covered in big windows. He'd definitely see us coming. Oh, then what do we do? He had already come up with a plan in the time they had been hanging there. Well, if we enter on the 4th floor, we can still keep our element of surprise. Sounds like a plan. Luckily, Midoriya had paused right at one of the 4th floor windows, so he carefully maneuvered himself closer. He was a bit afraid of releasing one of his hands to grab at the window, but he wouldn't let it show. Removing one of his hands from the hole, he touched the window with all 5 fingers and let the DT rush through. Uraraka gasped at the sight of the glass beginning to shatter. Feeling the strain on his one hanging hand, he poured more DT into his fingers and the glass shattered instantly. Thankfully, it broke apart in pieces and wasn't too loud. Can you reach the window from here? He asked, returning his hand to the notch for stability. Yeah, no problem, she whispered excitedly and slipped off his back and through the window hole. He felt the strain leave him once his partner got off his back and into the building. He then threw himself from the wall through the window as well, and landed with a crunch onto the glass pieces. Uraraka did a small, quiet cheer. Successful infiltration? Midoriya nodded. Lots of binds and corners, so watch out. The two then left the window and walked through the building. Both of them had memorized the floor plans fairly well, but what his partner didn't know was that a spirit was currently leading them through the building as well. The ghost scoped out each and every hallway they turned into, making sure he could see that they were safe. He was sure that Bakugo would be coming soon, and he expected either a sneak attack or a blatant rush. Then, as they passed by a small, dead-end hallway, Bakugo's form suddenly jumped out at them. The teen snapped into action and dived to cover his partner. Just as he did, the blonde let a loud explosion out, but thanks to his quick action, the blast only hit the wall. He barely grazed me, the boy announced. Are you all right, Uraraka? Yeah, thanks, she responded a bit shaky. That's good, he confirmed, but stick to the plan. The brunette nodded and got to her feet. Midoriya jumped to his as the smoke cleared and he could see the blonde. Nice dodging, Bakugo growled. Deku. The green-haired teen took a fighting stance. He had told Uraraka earlier that Bakugo would likely go after him, so they incorporated that into their plan. If he fought the raging blonde, he would likely ignore her. She would be able to get away and engage Ida faster than if the two fought Bakugo together. Back at the monitor room, the class grew excited again. Sneak attacks are so not manly, one red-haired student cried. All Might interjected, but they are a valid strategy for either heroes or villains. Another pink-skinned girl cried out in awe that Midori sure can dodge. Most of the class agreed with her. Todoroki again observed in silence. He could tell that the blonde was unnaturally hostile towards Midoriya. That made him suspicious. Did the two know each other or something? Bakugo rose to his feet and smiled menacingly, pulling one of his gauntlets back. I'm gonna mess you up just enough not to be disqualified. He rushed at him with a strong right hook, but the shy boy saw it coming. He rushed forward to close the gap between them and latched both hands onto the gauntlet. Making sure to have it secure, he steadied his stance and used Bakugo's own momentum to slam him to the ground. He held onto the gauntlet for a little longer than he needed to, and let the DT flow from his fingertips into it. Bakugo was just in shock. Did Deku just read my moves? Midoriya didn't waste the opportunity. Uraraka, go. She reacted almost immediately and took off. She didn't want to hesitate and cost her partner the opportunity he had given her. This was all part of their plan after all. The blonde was too angry to care that the girl left the scene. He was ready to bash Deku's face in. Bakugo, you almost always lead with that right hook, he stated. I've seen it enough to know. Both boys watched as the right gauntlet flaked away into dust, one in satisfaction and one in rage. You see, I've analyzed a lot of people in those notebooks of mine, he clarified, just like the one you blew up and tossed out the window. The blonde took up a squatting position, eyes full of fury. You spout all that crap, all while scared out of your mind. He pushed himself back up to his feet. It pisses me off. Suddenly, Bakugo's comm went off. Hey Bakugo, out came Ida's voice. Update me on the situation. What's happening? He just growled. Shut up and keep watch. I'm ready to wreck someone. And with that, he cut the line. Bakugo shot himself towards Midoriya with another explosion, ready to ram his knee into the boy. But he saw that coming too and quickly rolled out of the way. Reaching into the pocket that held his gloves, he rummaged around and pulled out a roll of capture tape. He knew it was unlikely that he would actually restrain the blonde, but it might give him an opportunity to attack. He managed to wrap the tape around his leg halfway before Bakugo noticed. He yanked hard on the tape, pulling the blonde off balance. What will come next? If I know Bakugo, he'll rage and attack again. Damn you, Deku. With his usual right hook, the teen dived out of the way as another explosion landed at the spot where he once was. Midoriya didn't want to fight here. The hallway was too narrow for him to pull any stunts with his sai. So during the chaos of that last attack, he quickly turned the corner and ran, knowing Bakugo would follow him. That didn't mean Bakugo liked it though. Get back here, Deku. He ducked into another hall and stopped just to catch his breath and collect his thoughts. Everything was going more or less according to plan. Bakugo came straight at him, flat out ignoring Uraraka. And based on the calm interaction, there wasn't much teamwork going on between the two on the villain team either. All was working in their favor so far. Now, he would just have to find a way to immobilize or distract Bakugo long enough to get away, so he could help his partner. Uraraka had managed to find the weapon along with Ida, but stayed hidden. She watched her friend mutter to himself, and wondered what he was saying. But she had to stay out of sight until Midoriya came back. She listened, and as Ida's mumblings grew louder. Bakugo has a natural tendency towards troublemaking, so this exercise is perfectly suited to him. I suppose I must also take on the role of a villain. He stayed on that tangent. Though it brings shame to the Ida family name, this training will help me become a better man. I must commit. He turned towards the doorway with a menacing look. I am the ultimate evil. The brunette couldn't stop her laughter at that. She let out a loud giggle and alerted the boy of her presence. So you've come, Uraraka, he announced with a dark undertone. I know your quirk allows you to levitate objects you touch, so before you arrived. The armored student spun around a bit and extended his arms in a flashy manner as the girl left her hiding spot. I enacted a counter-strategy against you by removing all objects on this floor. She quickly turned on her comm to get in touch with her partner, Midori. The boy answered quickly, currently weaving in and out of halls in search of a way to apprehend Bakugo. Uraraka, what is it? He'd have found me. Sorry, she sighed. And he moved everything, so I've got nothing to fight with. Midoriya scowled. That's all right. Where are you? 5th floor, right in the center. He looked up. So right above me. I'll be there as fast as I can. Just stall and stay on the defensive. The teen then heard a click and turned his eyes back to the hall to see Bakugo standing in front of him. His one remaining gauntlet was pointed right at him. He quickly let his partner go to put his full attention on the boy. The blonde chuckled. I'm sure you know from all your stalking, but he took offense at that statement, but didn't let it show. He didn't consider his analysis stalking. Sure, maybe it was a bit invasive and maybe it freaked people out, but stalking? No way. The sweat glands on my palms secrete. He continued, something like nitroglycerin. That's how I make my explosions. Midoriya quickly put the pieces together. The sweat, the gauntlet, the smug grin on his face. Don't tell me he's gonna. Tommy, who had stayed on the sidelines most of the fight, stepped in to consult his successor. Be careful, assuming they honored my design request. This gauntlet had been storing that fluid. He kept on, call it revenge for destroying my other gauntlet. All Might immediately interrupted through the intercom, his outburst scaring the observing students. Bakugo, don't. You'll kill him. The blonde smiled psychotically. He won't die if he dodges. Midoriya barely heard the pin get pulled out and clink to the ground before all hell broke loose. He reacted as fast as possible. There was no room for hesitation as he felt his hair scorch. He flexed his hand and summoned his scythe. Not skipping a beat, he unleashed the dam and released his DT into his weapon as if it were a wild, savage beast. He swung the blade to meet the blast, his previous preparation merely lasting a second. The shockwave met the blast and the two fought for dominance. Uraraka and Ida held their ground as the entire building shook on its foundation. All Might and the other students could only watch the cameras as Bakugo fought to prove and Midoriya fought to live. A second went by, but the two forces continued to struggle. Finally, the teen's shockwave won, but just barely. It pushed all the dust, smoke, and debris towards the angry blonde, who had to shield his eyes. Midoriya didn't waste a single moment, though, and distanced himself. His eyes landed on his exit, and he formulated a plan. The smoke didn't disappear right away, but he could still make out Bakugo's deranged smile, and it scared him. He quickly lowered his form to continue hiding in the smoke. He could tell the blonde was looking for him. Come on out, Deku, he teased. I want to crush you. The boy would not fall for the taunt, though, and instead searched the ground for something. His fingers ran over a small stone and he grinned. While hidden in the smoke, he tossed the stone to the other side of the damaged room. Bakugo heard a stone get kicked and narrowed in on his prey. Time to pound you. Midoriya stayed low to the ground and crawled away from the blonde, towards his exit. The smoke was still decently thick, and he was going to use that to his advantage. He threw another piece of debris to another corner of the room, hoping to confuse him. Gami watched his successor lead the blonde around the room, playing him for a fool. He was proud of his friend's cunning genius, but also relieved that he wasn't too badly injured. The sneaky teen tossed around a few more stones and could hear Bakugo grow more and more frustrated. After one final throw, he left the scene and headed up to meet his partner. Once he was sure Bakugo couldn't hear him, he tried to contact her, but realized his comm was out. He pushed his exhausted body to run faster up the stairs into the room where Uraraka had told him she was. He ran into the room, much to the surprise of Ada and his partner. The brunette quickly regrouped with him. "Midori, are you all right?" she pressed. "Just a bit roughed up, but I'll be fine," he replied. "We don't have too much time though. I'm not sure how long Bakugo will stay distracted." She nodded. "Well, I tried to grab the weapon myself, but Ada keeps moving it around." He huffed. Ada's speed would definitely be a problem. "Initiate Plan B then." "All right." The boy playing a villain was confused. What did this Plan B have in store for him? Midoriya quickly ran over to a support pillar closest to his partner and slammed his hands down onto it. It happened so fast, Ada had no time to react. The concrete pillar decayed almost instantaneously, and Uraraka grabbed it and activated her quirk. She lifted the pillar up over her head, now finally having a weapon. "Let's go, Midori," she cried. He grunted in response and followed up with both hands on the floor. The decay spread throughout the floor and it crumbled to pieces, exposing the floor below. The gap stretched all the way from left to right, leaving Ada no room to run away with the weapon. The teen quickly realized the parallels of this scene to his premonition, but was too caught up in the moment. Bakugo, who was directly under, figured out that the boy had tricked him and stormed up to fight him. As the debris flew around the room, he called out, "Now Uraraka." She swung the pillar, the force of the swing blowing the debris right at Ada's face. Home run comet. The armored student raised his hands to shield his face, and the hero team saw their chance. "Now's your chance." Midoriya yelled to his partner, "Go Uraraka." The brunette reacted quickly, dropping the concrete support pillar and touching her chest. She activated her quirk on herself and launched herself into the air, right above Ida's head. The teen watched as their plan unfolded to the smallest detail, of course, not without a few hitches. But he still watched in awe as Uraraka hugged the weapon, securing it for the team. Weapon secured. All Might's voice rang over all the comms, though Midoriya couldn't hear it. The hero team wins. And finally, the fight was over. The first thing the hero team did was barf. Well, more accurately, it was Uraraka who did the puking. Ada, being on the same side of the makeshift canyon as her, ran to her fallen form to help her as best he could. Kami floated over to greet his successor. "That was certainly an eventful fight," the man began. "You did well." The shy boy didn't believe him. "You really think so?" "I know so." "Hey Midoriya." He flinched at the name, but immediately knew it was Ada who was calling him. He turned to see his partner back on her feet and the other boy standing next to her. They carefully made their way back over the large gap using the pillar Uraraka had discarded. Soon enough, they were at his side. "That was quite the spectacular Plan B," Ada continued. "But if I may, what was Plan A?" The brunette took over. "Well, that was in case you hadn't moved anything out of the room for me. I was going to float as many things as I could while Midori batted them at you." Midoriya jumped back in. "It was our plan because it was less risky and easier to execute. We knew that Plan B was a bit dangerous, especially if this scenario had been for real, but we factored that in to make it as safe for a nuclear weapon as possible." Ada looked impressed. "Well, I am amazed. You certainly had the brains, power, and teamwork to win this challenge. I am not at all bothered to have been beaten by you two." The three smiled and laughed together. No one was majorly injured, and there weren't any hard feelings between them. They all congregated by the room's only exit to talk some more, oblivious to the dreadful hurricane headed their way. Bakugo reached the 5th floor and quickly found the room that Deku was in. He was seething mad. How dare the nerd play him like that, tricking him into thinking he was still somewhere in the smoke. It wasn't even just that. The whole time Deku had simply read him like a book, calculating his every move with terrifying accuracy. And that pissed him off. He wasn't going to let him off that easy. He stood in the doorway, surprising the three students, Deku. They all turned around in shock, and that's when Midoriya remembered his foresight. He couldn't believe he had forgotten something like that, even for a second. The boy tensed, ready to act when he needed to. The raging blonde kept talking. "You played me like a damn fool. I bet you think you're so smart, don't you?" He raised his only gauntlet up at him, his mind too full of anger to properly realize what he was doing. That same anger had given him enough sweat to fire off another large blast if he needed to. The teens gasped in shock. Ada was the first to reply. "Bakugo, what do you think you're doing?" All Might and the rest of the class watched in horror from the monitor room. The hero tried to de-escalate the situation. "Bakugo, the training exercise is over." But the blonde either didn't hear the pro or simply ignored him. "I'll tell you what I think, you fucking runt. I think you should learn your place." It was like slow motion. Both Midoriya and Gami watched as Bakugo pulled the pin out of his gauntlet for the second time. This was it. It was happening. The same scene he had witnessed at the subway station was unfolding in front of his very eyes. The explosion was too large. It was going to hit Ida and Uraraka as well. They were going to be blown into the hole in the floor. They would land on the floor below. Their spines would snap. They were going to die. He prayed. He prayed to the universe so desperately in that moment that he could reach his friends before they were hit. Uraraka and Ida were still crying out in shock, neither even realizing what was truly happening. They were too caught off guard to think about using their quirks. The two were simply in pure disbelief that a classmate would attack them in such a manner. Each frantic step the boy took was issued with so much force, he was afraid his legs would break. But he just kept on running towards his friends, who he watched in slow motion try to protect themselves from the blast. He had to make it. He just had to. I have to get there. He reached out his arms desperately, hoping, praying, to feel something between his ungloved fingers. He couldn't fail them. He wouldn't be able to live with himself. That it was his fault Bakugo had fired, and they just got caught in the midst. It was like a blessing, almost as if the universe finally granted his poor heart a wish that he managed to feel two different arms in his grasp. Without hesitation, he roughly shoved both Ida and Uraraka out of the way, just as he felt the heat of the explosion touch his costume. It wasn't a second later that he was blown off his feet. There was so much chaos going on, he didn't even realize that his friends were watching him in horror as he went over the edge. He felt himself fall through the hole he had made to win the training exercise, down to the spot on the 4th floor where he had tricked Bakugo with the stones. Even now, he could still tell there was still smoke on the ground. That massive explosion was truly impressive. He wasn't sure when exactly he had hit the ground, but after what seemed like forever, his vision went dark. Midoriya didn't know how long it had been since he lost consciousness, but assumed it wasn't long considering he was still laying on the wrecked 4th floor. His whole body hurt, so he didn't bother trying to get up. His mentor was at his side and kneeled down at his wake. "Jijigami," he struggled to say. Even his breaths were painful. What happened? Do not move. You were hit by Bakugo's explosion. His first thought went to his friends, who had also been up there. Ayad, they are safe. It sounded like the ghost was crying. Please, worry about yourself. His mind switched back into rational mode. Damages. Your injuries are severe. You cannot move, no matter what. The boy listened obediently. Titao. Your arm is impaled on a metal rod. I do not know if any of your other bones are broken. He couldn't see his arms from the angle he was at, but trusted in his companion's words. His neck ached so badly, it reminded him of the phantom pains earlier this morning. With each breath it felt as if his chest was collapsing on him. He was in so much pain, he just wished it would end already. Tired. The spirit knew his successor couldn't die, but that didn't mean he wanted him to fall back into unconsciousness again. No, fight it off, Izuku. You have to stay awake. The teen didn't want to disappoint his mentor, so he fought off the darkness as much as he wanted it to consume him. He was running out of energy though, and only managed to stay awake longer enough to see some robots rolling towards him. Then, he truly succumbed to his urge to sleep. Midoriya wouldn't lie, he was a bit disappointed to wake up again. But his eyes did flutter open, and once they did, he realized he was in what looked to be a hospital. But upon closer inspection, he realized it wasn't a hospital at all. It was the school's nursing office. He slowly craned his neck to the left and was met by an immediate scolding. Don't move your head. Your spine is still fragile. It took him a moment, but he recognized the voice to be Recovery Girl's. That made sense. She was the school's nurse, but he didn't listen and moved his head around again. Aizawa and Nezu were also in the office. What were they doing here? Midoriya. The principal began. It's so good to see you awake. How are you feeling? The boy wasn't sure if he could speak coherent sentences, but he took a try. Hurts. A lot. What happened? His homeroom teacher stepped in. Bakugo fired off an explosion at you, Ida, and Uraraka after the exercise was over. You managed to push them out of the way and took the brunt of the hit. You fell to the floor below and landed on your back, damaging your spine and impaling your left arm. He looked down at his arm and sure enough, there was a large scar in his forearm, the size of a metal rod. That's when he realized his arms were exposed and he was still in his hero costume. The sleeves had been ripped off. Recovery Girl piped up at that. The damage to your spinal cord should have killed you. It was in complete shambles, and yet when I used my quirk on you, it simply healed as if it were a normal injury. You need to explain yourself. It was a bit inconsiderate that the heroine was asking him to spill his secrets after he had nearly died. But at locking eyes with Nezu, he caved, knowing it was for the better. 2. Have immortality. The older lady clearly wasn't expecting that, but the principal jumped right back in to explain. Midoriya has been hiding a lot of things concerning his true abilities for his own safety. I will explain everything to you later. Midoriya hoped that was the end of the questions, and the teachers would let him rest in peace, but he was sorely mistaken. We just have one more thing, Midoriya, Nezu continued, before we must go. The teen just nodded. He noticed Gami at his bedside, holding his hand gently. He squeezed it tightly just to let the man know he was okay. Well, as okay as he could be right now. Midoriya, we had to take off your costume to perform a medical exam on you. The nurse picked up, and I noticed some concerning things. Concerning things. What in Paradise's name was she talking about? You have a massive scar on your chest, as well as numerous ones on your arms. None of those were from today's incident. So I must ask. She explained, where did you get those? Oh shit. Oh fuck. Of course, he didn't respond right away, so the heroine continued her onslaught. I'm a nurse. I know plenty about how scars form. The one on your chest is clearly a burn scar, and the others were hard to figure out at first. But from their depth, I can tell they're from glass shards. Nezu tagged himself in. We just want to know where you got them from, Midoriya. Can you tell us? Aizawa still hadn't said a word. The boy could feel himself panicking. Shit, they had already found out about his whole role as death. He couldn't just tell them his whole tragic sob story. Then what would happen? Would they deem him too much a risk to stay at UA? Or worse, send him off to some prison so he couldn't take his revenge if he wanted to? Which he didn't. But his rationality went out the window at that moment, and all the worst possible scenarios ran through his mind. Izu, you have to tell them. They might even be able to help Yo. Midoriya completely forgot that Gami was invisible to anyone other than him, or that recovery girl didn't even know about his existence. His mouth simply opened and he didn't think. You expect me to tell everything to complete strangers? They already interrogated me yesterday. No one said a word after, and that's how he had realized he just said that aloud. It was so quiet. The boy swore he could hear the pin from Bakugo's gauntlet fall over and over again. He really screwed up this time. Nezu was the first to respond, and he wasn't as composed as before. You were talking to Gamison again, right, Midoriya? The boy was completely embarrassed in himself. Yeah, I'm sorry, sir. But the principal didn't stop there. He knew the look on his student's face. It was the look of years of submission, of pain, of abuse, something he had gone through himself many years ago. You're being hurt at home, aren't you, Midoriya? He snapped up from his hospital bed, startling the teachers in the room and air. The words were foaming at his mouth and came out incoherent. He clutched at his chest, right where he knew the burn scar from his father laid. Aizawa finally took charge of the situation. How about we ask you questions, and you answer? Does that sound okay? He couldn't put the words together, so he just nodded his head solemnly. The racerhead didn't stop. When did you get that scar on your chest? He hesitated, but the ghost next to him gave him a slight nudge. When I was 4. Recovery girl asked next. Did someone give it to you? The teen nodded shakily. My father. How is Quirk? Nezu picked up there. Can you explain? He took a shaky swallow. Is Quirk is fire breathing? He burned me 3 nights after my Quirk diagnosis and never came back. Aizawa realized at that statement that no one actually knew the boy's true quirk. What was the diagnosis? Oh God, why? Why was everything unraveling like this? Take your time, dearie, he heard the older woman say. I didn't. He forced the words to come out. I didn't have a quirk. SSO, he didn't want me. The room was silent. No one said a word or asked another question. Midoriya didn't want to hear the empty nothingness though, so he just kept on like he did with Todoroki, hoping to change the subject. The words came out easier when he was deflecting anyway. My mom became an alcoholic after he left. She blames me for everything, he rambled. She comes home late though, so I don't see her often. Still, no one said anything. He was growing more and more nervous and could feel his panic take over his form. He realized he still didn't have his gloves on. My gloves. I need my gloves. He yanked his arms up from the hospital bed, ignoring the IV in one. Holding them up in midair, he made sure his fingertips weren't touching anything. Aizawa was the first to figure out what was happening, his rational mind kicking into overdrive. He's losing control of his powers right now, the normally tired man exclaimed, remembering the boy had told them his powers acted up under emotional distress. We need something he can use it on. Recovery girl quickly tossed the pro a clipboard, and he threw it at the student in the hospital bed. In hindsight, that probably wasn't a good idea, but luckily the student caught it. The clipboard disintegrated to mere dust in an instant. The boy calmed down. Gami rummaged through the remains of his hero costume currently on the floor and managed to find and pull out a pair of discarded gloves. The pocket they were once in was nothing more than shreds of fabric. The ghost somehow was able to hold them and toss them into his successor's lap. The teachers were surprised at a pair of gloves seemingly moving on their own, but the man and the rodent knew the truth to what was happening. Thanks, Gami, he answered and slipped them on. Instantly, he felt relaxed and nearly fell asleep. He leaned back into the bed, returning to a calm state. Nezu tugged a paw at Aizawa's pant leg. Well, we will be going now, Midoriya. Please, rest up. I hope to see you out of here later. The principal left and his homeroom teacher quickly followed. Recovery girl was the only one left in the room, besides the spirit of course. She walked over to him and gave him a quick kiss on the forehead. The teen could feel his energy drain away. Get some rest, dearie, she spoke softly. You need it. For the third time, his eyes closed and he was off to dreamland. God, could this day get any worse? Midoriya awoke some time later and was deemed in stable enough condition by Recovery Girl to return to class. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but he was definitely sure that all of the other training battles were already over. That disappointed him as he was excited to see his classmates' quirks in action, but what could he really do? The nurse had told him to be careful moving around as his spine was still fragile, but he wouldn't have to worry about snapping it. The hole in his arm was fully healed, and only a small, round scar remained. Most of his stamina was gone, since Recovery Girl had used it to speed up his healing, so he was now groggily dragging himself down the hallway. The heroine had given him a spare uniform to wear, since his costume was so mangled. His arms were now completely covered, with thick bandages around one. He used his signature glove-covered hands to pull open his classroom door, the mere action putting serious strain on his body. He barely got the door open when someone called his name. "Oh, Midoriya's here. Welcome back, man," one student with red, spiky hair cried. The door was flung open for him, and the boy was immediately bombarded by his class. He backed away in discomfort, still an emotional mess from earlier in the nurse's office, but the crowd was dispelled by two worried students, who shoved their way to the front. "Oh, Midori," Uraraka whimpered out with concern. "Are you okay?" He reached out to her. "I'm fine, but..." Ada was trying to hold some students back from tackling him, but that didn't mean he wasn't concerned as well. "Midoriya, you're not seriously injured, are you?" "No, well I was," he started, "but I'm fine now. So please don't worry." The brunette jumped back in, nearly embracing him before she remembered he was hurt. "You took the hit for us. I was terrified when I saw you go over." The teen's mind flashed back to his premonition, but he pushed it away. It hadn't come true. He had stopped it. He had saved them. "I couldn't let you guys get hit. You're my friends after all." Ada looked heartwarmed. "Still, I must ask you please be more self-conserving." You had the entire class petrified. Midoriya was positive that it wasn't the whole class, but still, he had never had so many people worried about him. "I'll try." He flashed a smile. Uraraka wiped away a few tears and gave him a gentle hug, unable to resist anymore. He flinched at first, but slowly hugged back. The touch didn't feel as uncomfortable as it would have back at Aldera. Maybe that was a sign that things were getting better. "We're just so glad you're all right," she sniffled. The girl eventually backed away and smiled in return. Ada, having done his version of damage control, now stood next to her. His glasses hid any stray droplets that may have escaped. But now that the two students had properly checked on their friend, the rest of the class pounced. The red-haired boy came back up to him. "I don't know what you were saying back there, but that was a wild battle." A girl with pink skin and yellow horns spoke next. "Your dodging was so good." Another student with brown hair and plump lips interrupted. "We were all super pumped after that crazy first round." The shy teen just smiled awkwardly during all of that. I'm afraid I don't know all your names just yet." The red, spiky-haired boy introduced himself first. "I'm Kirishima Ijiru. Your fight was so manly." "I'm Ashido Mina." The pink female went next. "You dodge really well." "I'm Asui Tsuyu," said the frog girl Midoriya had noticed a few times, "but you can call me Tsu." The brunette only introduced himself with his family name. "And I'm Sato." Midoriya's smile turned genuine. "Well, I'm Midoriya Izuku, but I'm sure you already knew that. Though, I'd prefer to be called by a nickname." The newly introduced Ashido cheered. "Well, I heard you're going by Midori, so I'll just call you that. Plus it's cute." The boy wasn't sure how he felt at being considered cute, but the rest of the class quickly latched onto the name, so he didn't mind. Plus, he actually enjoyed the nickname quite a lot. Ashido was a very animated person, and he realized that very quickly. But that didn't mean he was expecting her to slap a hand on his back. He hissed in pain and she moved it frantically. "Oh, I'm so sorry." She apologized. No, it's fine," he reassured. "My spine is still a bit sensitive." Ada activated worried dad mode at that. "But you told us you weren't seriously injured." "Well, I was, but Recovery Girl healed me up," he tried to clarify. Uraraka leapt on Ada's bandwagon. "Midori, how badly were you hurt?" The teen waved his hands dismissively. "Guys, I'm fine now. You really don't need to worry." But at his friend's unbelieving looks, he caved. "My spine was badly damaged when I fell." That was definitely an understatement, but he didn't want to tell his friends that he should technically be dead. "And I got my arm stuck on a metal rod, but I'm fine now." The brunette clasped her hands over her mouth in shock. "Oh my god." Ada only grew more worried. "Will you be alright to continue your hero studies?" The rest of the class seemed interested in that. "Yeah, I told you guys. I'm practically brand new again. I just need a good night's sleep." That was finally enough to de-escalate the situation and calm his friend's nerves. His body ached from simply standing, so Uraraka and Ada finally allowed him a moment to breathe and let him sit down alone at his desk. He carefully leaned back in his chair so as to not aggravate his spine further, and let out a deep sigh he had been holding since waking up for the first time in Recovery Girl's office. But even then, the universe would not allow him a single moment of peace. Though, the peace breaker ended up being Todoroki, so it wasn't as bad as it could have potentially been. I know you have been insistent on your condition, the boy started, but are you truly all right, Izuku? He widened his smile. Yeah. Don't worry. I'm not referring to your injuries, he interrupted bluntly. Geez, he really couldn't slip anything past this kid. His smile fell. How could you tell? Is it really that obvious? The candy cane student shook his head. It's not, but your eyes give it away. Do you want to talk about it? Midoriya gulped. It was weighing heavy on his chest. But he didn't want to put that kind of strain on a friend. Todoroki noticed the hesitation. Yesterday, you said you wanted to work through this together. That means you have to talk as well. He was sure the boy didn't mean to put it that rudely, but he got the message. Recovery Girl saw my scars, he whispered quietly, hoping not to attract any unwanted attention. She brought in Aizawa-sensei and Nezusa. The red and white-haired boy stiffened. I'm assuming you told them. I didn't want to. He mumbled with a slight whimper, picking at his gloves, but they practically figured it out themselves. I don't know what to do. What do you mean? The teen looked up, finding it unnaturally easy to open up the boy in front of him. I'm scared. If they decided to do something, where am I going to go? I can't stay with my father. Hell, I don't even know where he is. What if I'm put into a different home? Will I even be able to come to UA anymore? Todoroki cut off his frantic rambling, but softened at his desperate look. I'm sure it will all end up all right. But what if it doesn't? The student reached into the back pocket of his uniform and pulled out a small sliver of paper, neatly cut and folded. Here, we'll figure this out together. Then Todoroki returned to his seat. Midoriya didn't miss the fact that he had said together. He unfolded the piece of paper, only to see a phone number on it. Well, that was smooth. The teen socked his mentor hard in the arm. He was sure the student only meant it as a means of communication, so he wouldn't feel as alone. But that also made him wonder, did Todoroki prepare the paper beforehand to give it to him, or did he just have random slips of paper with his number on it for emergencies? Either way, it seemed a bit strange, but he took the gesture as a friendly one. He entered the number into his phone and labeled the contact Shouto. Gami watched as he did, but did not spare him from any teasing. Given name, the spirit joked. Be quiet, he hissed under his breath. You weren't saying anything yesterday. He did not give you his number yesterday. Oh, you're unbearable, the boy huffed, but the ghost didn't miss the small smirk on his face. I thought you were more mature than this. The man sighed. I have been mature for over 5 centuries. Let me have this. He rolled his eyes. Whatever you say. The duo chatted sparingly since they were still in class, but eventually the bell rang and Midoriya got ready to leave. He wasn't sure if he would get to go home or not. Maybe he was just overthinking things. He slipped his backpack on as Uraraka and Ida joined him. Together, the three made their way out of the classroom, only to be stopped by Aizawa at the door again. Midoriya, he began, I need you to go to Recovery Girl. She wants to do one last checkup before you leave. Darn, the brunette sighed. We've been foiled again. Sorry guys, he replied. Ida reassured him, it is completely fine. We'd rather have you in the best shape possible, even if that means we do not walk to the subway together. The group walked together down the hallway, but split once the reserved boy reached the nurse's office. He entered the room, to which only the heroine was there. She motioned for him to sit on the bed and started to check him over. Nezu explained your situation to me, she stated. Oh, he wasn't sure what to say. Is, Gummy in here? The older woman asked. He looked over to his ghostly companion. Yeah, he's standing at the foot of the bed. Please tell her I thank her for taking care of you. You are far too reckless for your own good. He wants to thank you for healing me, the teen repeated. He also thinks I'm too reckless. The heroine laughed. Well, I'm certainly inclined to agree with him. Though, your injuries seem to be healing fine. You should be back to normal by tomorrow. Oh, that's wonderful, Midoriya. Both parties turned to see the principal and a tired teacher walk into the office. Nezu had a bright smile on his face and Eraserhead seemed merely indifferent. Nezu-san, he greeted, Aizawa-sensei. What are you doing here? The rodent's smile fell to more of a neutral face. Well, we have decided what to do about your situation. Midoriya instantly tensed. Gami moved to stand closer to his successor. He continued, as a school, it is our responsibility that all of our students are kept safe, and that includes both on our premise and at home. Aizawa-san and I have come to the conclusion that returning home isn't a safe option for you. He wasn't sure how to feel about that. Sure, he didn't really want to go home, but that was all he knew. What would happen to him now? Nezu took a step forward. I don't think that putting you into a foster home right now will necessarily help your mental state as a growing teenager. Plus, I'm assuming you would need to hide your role as a Grim Reaper from anyone new that you'd be living with. For the last time. Gami, he shushed. I'm sorry. Please continue. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. He realized the principal was going off script. This wasn't what they had discussed. Leave it to the chaotic rodent to throw a wrench into the gears at the last minute. So, as UA's principal, I have access to a better option for you that would ensure you remain enrolled as well as out of your household. The boy fiddled with his gloves nervously. Well, that's good, I guess. Unfortunately, this solution will only be temporary until UA officially works out all the details with the police. So, what's going to happen to me? He wondered why the principal was stalling so much. Well, I'll be using the school's executive power to pull you from your home, since we've deemed it unstable for you to live under. Nezu paused briefly. And you'll be staying with Aizawa-san in the meantime. What? Midoriya cried out in shock. Aizawa turned to the principal. This is not what we discussed. Nezu just smirked sadistically. Things don't always go according to plan. Now do they, Aizawa-san?